What if the only reason you aren't wildly successful isn't a lack of talent or, a lack of luck or connections?
Right.
But what if it's actually just a massive fundamental miscalculation in basic math?
I mean, that question just forces a complete reevaluation of how we view high achievers.
Yeah, it really does.
Because we spend so much of our lives, searching for this secret ingredient, we just assume the people at the very top of their fields possess some hidden advantage.
Like a secret playbook or something.
Exactly. Or maybe just a vastly superior intellect that we simply don't have access to.
We tend to think of massive success as like a genetic lottery,
Mm.
or maybe it's purely circumstantial.
Oh, for sure. Being born in the right zip code.
Right. Attending the right Ivy League school, or, I don't know, just happening to sit next to the perfect angel investor on a flight.
We love to externalize the reasons for success.
Well, yeah, because it protects our ego from the reality of our own output, right?
It really does. But the philosophy we are dissecting today fundamentally challenges that entire worldview.
It totally flips it on its head.
It does. In this deep dive, we are going to extract the foundational principles from the opening arguments of Grant Cardone's The 10X Rule, specifically the introduction and chapter 1.
And we're focusing on this because it actively demystifies success.
Completely.
It takes this concept of achieving extraordinary things, strips away the whole mystical lottery element, and turns it into a concrete, controllable formula.
A formula of exponential thought and action. It changes success from something that, happens to you into something you actually manufacture mathematically.
So our mission today is to break down the exact parameters of this 10x philosophy. We really want to explore why our natural, everyday estimation of how much effort things take is, well, fundamentally flawed.
Flawed from the moment we wake up, honestly.
Exactly. And ultimately, we are going to help you build a completely new mental framework for achieving what Cardone describes as unreasonable success.
Unreasonable is really the perfect word to anchor this whole discussion.
It is, isn't it?
Yeah, because as we unravel these concepts, it becomes increasingly clear that being reasonable, being measured, and being practical are like entirely the reasons people get stuck in mediocrity.
So let's get right into the anatomy of this rule. Because the phrase 10x, I mean, it sounds incredibly catchy.
Oh, it's very punchy.
Right. It has that marketing-friendly ring to it that makes it really easy to dismiss. Like it's just another motivational slogan.
10x your business, 10x your life.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
But Cardone is actually laying out a very specific dual-part mechanical process here. It's not just a cheerleading tactic at all.
No, and the dual nature of the concept is where most people get it completely wrong.
How so?
Well, they hear 10x and they assume it just means hustle harder, or on the flip side, they assume it means, manifest bigger dreams.
Right, just sit around and think really big thoughts.
Exactly. But Cardone's argument is that it requires both elements operating simultaneously.
Okay, break that down for us.
First, you have to adjust your physical actions to 10x quantities. You have to literally multiply your execution by 10.
The actual output.
Yes. But second, and this is equally important, you have to adjust your thinking and your targets to 10x levels.
So they have to match.
They have to. You cannot have the massive action without the massive target, and you cannot have the massive target without the massive action.
He calls it a discipline. And that framing is really interesting to me.
Why is that?
Because by calling it a discipline, it removes the magic. It makes it sound like, I don't know, brushing your teeth or going for a run.
Yes, exactly.
He actually goes out of his way to state that this isn't an education, it isn't a special talent, it's not a genetic gift, and it certainly isn't good fortune.
And framing it as a discipline democratizes the whole concept of massive success.
Right. It means anyone can do it.
If it's a discipline, it means it's available to anyone, regardless of their starting point, provided they are, willing to manually apply the formula.
And he really elevates this idea.
Oh, absolutely. He elevates it to the absolute pinnacle of achievement. He considers this dual action approach to be the holy grail of success.
The one thing that separates everyone.
Yeah. If there is an end-all, be-all characteristic that separates the billionaires from the bankrupt, he argues this is it.
But to understand why this rule is even necessary in the first place, we have to look at his analysis of why people usually fail.
Which is fascinating.
It is, because his perspective here completely flies in the face of conventional wisdom.
Oh, totally.
From the time we are in grade school, society, our teachers, our mentors, and, our well-meaning parents constantly drill into us the importance of setting realistic goals.
Be practical.
Right. We are taught to be practical. We are taught not to bite off more than we can chew.
And we see this formalized in the business world all the time, too.
No, the SMART goals.
Yes, think about the traditional SMART goals framework that literally every corporate manager is taught. Goals are supposed to be specific, measurable, achievable, realistic, and time-bound.
Right, that R and the A.
Exactly. That realistic and achievable part is treated as absolute gospel in the corporate world.
And Cardone takes direct aim at that, doesn't he?
Oh, he destroys it. He views setting realistic goals as the single biggest mistake a person can make.
Which sounds so counterintuitive.
It does. But he argues that aiming for an average, realistic target single-handedly destroys the chance of that goal ever becoming a reality.
Why is that exactly?
His reasoning comes down to the mechanics of motivation and volume. Look, a realistic goal doesn't require a radical change in your behavior.
It's just a small tweak.
Right. It allows you to maintain your current operating system with just a slight adjustment. The 10x philosophy guarantees success not because you become some sniper with perfect precision, but because you become a tidal wave of overwhelming volume.
Let me try out an analogy here, because when I first encountered this idea of the target dictating the effort, I immediately thought about physical training.
Okay, I like that. Let's hear it.
So imagine walking into a gym and you stroll over to the rack with the intention of picking up a 5-pound dumbbell. Your brain knows it's 5 pounds, you barely engage your muscles, you can literally be looking at your phone, chewing gum, completely distracted, and you can still easily lift the weight.
Sure.
The target is so low that your physiological response is practically non-existent.
Right. Your nervous system doesn't need to recruit any extra resources for a task that small. It stays completely dormant.
Exactly. But if you walk up to a 200-pound barbell, the dynamic shifts entirely.
Oh, completely.
You cannot be distracted. Your entire nervous system has to lock in. Your breathing naturally changes, your focus narrows to a pinpoint, and your body recruits completely different, deeper muscle fibers just to brace for the load.
You have to respect the weight.
Right. The sheer size of the target dictates the physiological response of the organism. So is that the underlying mechanism Cardone is applying to business and life goals?
That physical response is a brilliant parallel to the psychological response he's describing.
Really?
Yeah. When you set a goal to simply, I don't know, pay the rent this month or get a 3% raise at work.
That's the 5-pound weight.
Exactly. Your psychological and creative response is equivalent to picking up that 5-pound dumbbell. You don't fully engage because you simply don't have to.
You just phone it in.
Yeah, your deep creative problem-solving skills stay completely dormant. Your resilience isn't fortified. You operate on a very shallow level of your potential.
Because the stakes are perceived as manageable.
Manageable, but fundamentally uninspiring. However, when you set a target that is 10 times larger.
Like the 200-pound barbell.
Right. Say your goal isn't a 3% raise, but to completely dominate your company's sales leaderboard and double your income.
Wow. But
your internal mechanisms are forced to lock in. A goal of that magnitude demands a level of action, networking, and ingenuity that a realistic goal can never trigger.
because the old way won't work anymore.
Precisely. The massive goal forces you to abandon autopilot and wake up.
It demands a completely different strategy. Like, if my goal is to get 1 new client this month, I might just, send a few emails and wait around.
And that might actually work for one client.
Right. But if my goal is to get 50 new clients this month, sending a few emails mathematically cannot work. I have to fundamentally rebuild my entire approach to acquisition.
You have to scale.
Yeah, I have to look at partnerships, mass marketing, automated funnels. The goal forces the innovation.
And that leads perfectly into his argument for volume over precision.
Okay, what does he mean by that?
Well, when you are operating with 10x targets, you aren't trying to execute one delicate, perfect maneuver. You are taking such massive, overwhelming action that failure on an individual level just ceases to matter.
It gets absorbed by the volume.
Exactly. If you make 1,000 sales calls instead of 10, the fact that you fumbled your pitch on 50 of them is totally irrelevant.
Because you still made 950 other calls.
Right. The sheer volume ensures the outcome. And even if you fall short of a 10x goal, say you aim for 100 clients and you only get 30.
You're still way ahead.
Exponentially further ahead than if you had set a realistic goal of 5 clients and achieved it perfectly.
Wow. So bringing this down to a practical experiment for the listener.
Yeah, let's make it actionable.
Before you start your next major project or sit down to plan your revenue targets for the year, try an exercise in manual calculation.
Good idea.
Take the amount of effort, the number of phone calls, the marketing budget, and the hours you actually think you need to achieve your goal, and Physically multiply that number by 10.
Just bake it into the plan.
Build that expectation of massive volume into your baseline plan. If you assumed an initiative will take 1 week of energy, prep your team and your schedule for 10 weeks of sustained effort.
Because anticipating that level of required effort prevents the initial shock and disappointment when things inevitably get difficult.
Right, you're already braced for impact.
Which brings us to one of the most controversial and counterintuitive claims Cardone makes regarding effort and energy.
Oh boy, the same energy paradox.
Yeah.
We really need to spend some time on this because it is a massive stumbling block for a lot of people.
It definitely is.
So Cardone asserts that it takes the exact same amount of energy and effort to make $10 million as it does to make $10,000.
Which sounds crazy.
It does, and he also applies it to personal life, claiming it takes the same energy to have an incredible, thriving marriage as it does to have an average, mediocre one.
Yeah, on a purely surface level, that sounds like a mathematical impossibility.
It really does.
It sounds like something a motivational speaker yells from a stage just to get a cheer from the crowd, you know?
Wait, hold on, stop there, because I
Yeah.
have to be honest, my immediate reaction to this concept is genuine skepticism.
I think everyone's is.
It really does sound like a bumper sticker.
Yeah.
Let's look at a literal physical clock for a second.
Okay, let's do it.
A CEO running a $10 million global supply chain operation is fielding international crises at 3 in the morning.
Sure.
They're managing hundreds of employees and carrying the weight of massive financial risk.
Absolutely.
Meanwhile, the person working a part-time minimum wage retail shift is clocking in, folding clothes, and going home at 5 p.m. Right.
So how can he possibly justify the math that this requires the exact same energy?
It is a completely fair challenge. If we are strictly measuring active, billable hours on a stopwatch, yeah, the math doesn't align at all.
Right. The CEO is working more hours.
But Cardone is challenging us to expand our definition of what energy actually is.
Okay. What does he mean by energy then?
He is looking at the total energetic drain on the human system. The emotional, psychological, and spiritual toll, not just physical labor.
Oh, I see.
He is pointing out that struggling in mediocrity or barely scraping by is deeply, fundamentally exhausting.
The friction of the everyday struggle.
Exactly. Consider the mental bandwidth consumed by the person making $10,000 or $30,000 a year.
Right.
They are constantly performing mental gymnastics at the grocery store just to keep the bill under a certain amount.
Well, yeah. Calculating every item in the cart.
They experience a jolt of pure panic when their car makes a strange noise because they literally can't afford a $500 repair.
It's terrifying. They stay awake staring at the ceiling, worrying about how to pay for their child's health care. That state of constant low-grade financial terror is a heavy, crushing exertion of human energy.
It's the energy of anxiety. It's totally defensive energy.
Yes, it is the draining energy of pure survival. Cardone's argument is that operating at a 10x level, aiming for the 10 million, doesn't necessarily require more energy than surviving in the middle class.
It just feels different.
Exactly. It changes the nature of the energy you are expending.
You know, I think I see where this is going. It's kind of like the difference between treading water and swimming toward a distant shore.
Oh, I love that analogy. Unpack that.
So if you've ever actually tried treading water for like more than 5 minutes, you know it is agonizingly exhausting.
It's awful.
You are kicking, you're flailing your arms, your heart rate is just spiking, and you are burning massive amounts of calories.
But you aren't going anywhere.
Exactly. You are expending maximum effort literally just to keep your head above the surface. Eventually, you just sink from sheer fatigue.
Because there's no progress.
Right. While swimming toward a shore, even a very, very distant one, utilizes that same physical output, but channels it into forward momentum.
That perfectly captures it.
Right. Like swimming the butterfly stroke toward an island might be incredibly intense, but every single stroke pulls you closer to a destination.
You're actually moving.
The psychological experience of that effort is completely different. Treading water creates despair, but swimming creates adrenaline and purpose.
That dynamic perfectly illustrates the shift. When you are aiming for massive success, you are absolutely expending intense energy.
You're definitely working hard.
You are working long hours, facing massive rejections, and navigating really complex problems. But it is the energy of creation.
Yes, building something.
It is the energy of building, of momentum, of forward motion. That kind of energy actually fuels itself. When you are aligned with a massive target, the effort generates a return that revitalizes you.
And his marriage analogy fits perfectly into this too, doesn't it?
It really does.
Like, the effort required to maintain a mediocre, average marriage, navigating the passive aggressiveness, swallowing unsaid resentments, dealing with the heavy silence at the dinner table.
The sheer boredom of it all.
Right, that is incredibly taxing on the soul. But to build a great marriage requires active communication, planning dates, being vulnerable, and confronting issues head-on.
Which is also hard work.
It is a massive amount of effort, but it is generative. It produces joy and security, which actually gives you more energy in return.
The crucial realization here is that you are already spending the energy. The person struggling in the middle class is already exhausted.
They're already tired.
The person in the average relationship is already emotionally drained. Cardone is simply pointing out that if you are already paying the ultimate price in terms of your life force, you might as well buy a better outcome.
That's a powerful way to put it.
You are spending 10x energy to manage the friction of an average life. So redirect that exact same energy output toward a 10x goal.
So for anyone listening right now who feels stuck or perpetually exhausted, try auditing your current struggles.
Take a hard look at them.
Look at the areas of your life where you feel like you are just treading water. Ask yourself, how many mental and emotional calories am I burning just trying to manage the stress of settling for average?
It's probably a lot more than you think.
Recognize that the exhaustion you feel isn't a lack of capacity. You have immense capacity. You are just deploying it defensively instead of offensively.
And shifting from defense to offense is often a massive turning point for people.
I can imagine.
And this actually connects deeply to a very personal admission Cardone makes early on in the book. It is a moment of vulnerability that underscores why he is so aggressive about this whole philosophy.
Yeah, that section was striking. Cardone, who is, known for being incredibly wealthy and unapologetically boastful about his success,
Very boastful.
he admits that he has a massive lingering regret about his life. And his regret isn't that he was lazy.
No, he's always been a hard worker.
Yeah. He makes it very clear he has worked relentlessly his entire life. His biggest regret is that he failed to apply the thinking part of the 10x rule early in his career.
Right. He openly states that he is not Warren Buffett, he is not Steve Jobs, and he didn't build a Google or a Facebook.
And he doesn't blame that on bad luck.
No. He doesn't attribute that gap to a lack of intelligence or a lack of market timing. He attributes it entirely to the fact that for the first 30 years of his business career, he got the 10x action part right, but he totally failed at the 10x goal-setting part.
He didn't aim high enough.
Exactly. He didn't set his targets 10 times higher than his initial dreams.
He let his environment dictate his ceiling. He says his goals were influenced and limited by the way he was brought up, by middle-class values,
Yes.
and by conventional definitions of what was, quote-unquote, realistic or comfortable.
And he dissects the psychology of a comfortable goal to show why it is inherently dangerous.
Dangerous. How so?
He argues that limiting your desired success, saying, I just want enough to be happy, or I just want to pay off my mortgage and have a quiet life.
The dream for a lot of people.
Right. But he says that is a direct violation of the 10x rule because it automatically limits the amount of action you are willing to take. You cap your potential energy output before you even begin.
But why is that a fatal flaw? Let's say someone is listening right now and they're thinking, well, I don't want a private jet.
Right.
I don't want to run a massive empire. I genuinely just want a nice, quiet, comfortable life.
Right.
Why does Cardone view that desire for comfort as a literal trap?
Because the world is fundamentally unstable.
Okay.
In any pursuit, whether it is a business, a career, or a family, you are going to encounter severe, unexpected roadblocks.
Life happens.
The economy will crash,
Right.
a major client will go bankrupt, a global pandemic will completely disrupt your industry, a sudden health crisis will drain your savings.
Things you can't predict.
Exactly. The problem with the goal of just being comfortable is that it provides a very low psychological payoff.
Ah, I see. The reward isn't big enough to justify the suffering.
Exactly. When the inevitable massive resistance hits, a comfortable goal does not generate enough motivation to keep you pushing through intense pain.
It's just not worth it.
Right. If your goal was just to have a nice little lifestyle business and suddenly the market turns and you have to work 80-hour weeks just to keep it from going bankrupt,
Your brain just taps out.
your brain will logically say, this isn't worth it. I just want it to be comfortable and this is miserable, so I quit.
That makes so much sense.
Huh.
It makes me think of packing for a road trip.
Okay, let's hear the road trip.
So imagine you are driving to a destination that is exactly 60 miles away. and your car gets exactly 20 miles to the gallon.
Okay, easy math.
So, being highly practical and realistic, you put exactly 3 gallons of gas in the tank. Mathematically, it is precise. It is a perfectly realistic plan based on ideal conditions.
But the real world never operates under ideal
Right,
conditions.
so you hit the highway, and there's a massive traffic jam. You sit idling for 2 hours,
Burning gas.
or a severe storm forces you to take a 15-mile detour. Or you get a flat tire and have to leave the engine running to stay warm while you wait for a tow truck.
Oh, wow, yeah.
Because you only packed enough fuel for a realistic journey, the moment you encounter resistance, you are completely stranded on the side of the road. You literally left zero margin for error.
That road trip scenario is the absolute perfect manifestation of Cardone's argument. Realistic goals leave zero margin for the reality of resistance.
They assume everything will go perfectly.
And when people limit the amount of success they desire, they artificially restrict the fuel they bring to the journey. When the unexpected happens, and we know it always happens, they fail miserably at doing what is necessary to survive the storm.
So aiming for average doesn't actually guarantee an average life.
No, it doesn't.
It almost guarantees a subpar life because average doesn't account for gravity, age, market shifts, or tragedy.
And Cardone actually takes it a step further and frames this as a moral issue.
A moral issue. Really?
Yes. He believes that limiting the amount of success you desire is an ethical breach. He views it as a denial of your duty to fully utilize your capabilities to protect your family, your company, and your future from the inevitable hardships of life.
Wow, that is a heavy shift in perspective. It means we really have to stop apologizing for wanting massive success.
We do.
Because there is so much societal conditioning that makes us feel greedy or selfish for wanting to be incredibly wealthy or highly influential or dominant in our field.
Oh, absolutely.
We are taught to be humble, to shrink down, to be satisfied with our lot in life.
But Cardone is essentially giving the reader a mandate to demand more, to view massive success not as a luxury, but as an absolute necessity for survival and contribution.
So try this thought experiment, everyone listening. Look at the numbers you've currently written down for your income target, your business growth, or even your physical fitness.
Whatever your current goal is.
Right. Now, if you added a 0 to that revenue target right now, what is the first thing in your business you would be forced to break and completely rebuild?
That's a great question.
Make the target so massively appealing and so structurally demanding that the necessary daily work no longer feels like an irritating chore, but an absolute mission.
Because if the goal is massive enough, the problems you encounter along the way shrink in comparison.
They're just bumps in the road.
Exactly. They just become logistical hurdles to be managed rather than existential crises that make you want to quit entirely.
Okay, so we've established the foundation here. We know the what and the why. We need 10x actions paired with 10x thoughts.
Right.
We know that realistic goals are dangerous because they lack the gravitational pull to drag us through hardship. But let's look at the actual logistics of this.
Let's get into the how.
Yeah. What does 10x execution actually look like when you wake up on a random Tuesday morning? How does a person physically operate at this level day in and day out?
Well, Cardone provides some very concrete historical examples from his own life to illustrate this. He focuses heavily on the sheer volume of his early actions.
He mentions his early days in sales.
Right. Yes. He realized very quickly that the only way to ensure success wasn't to necessarily be the smoothest talker.
Right. He didn't need the perfect pitch.
No, he needed to overwhelm the statistical probability of failure. For every single sales presentation, phone call, or networking appointment his competitors were making, he forced himself to make 10.
Just burying them in volume.
Exactly. And we see the exact same pattern when he started investing in real estate.
The real estate example was wild.
He didn't just casually browse Zillow and look at 3 or 4 houses to find a good deal. He states that he would look at 10 times more properties than he actually had the capital to buy.
10 times more.
He would immerse himself in the sheer volume of the market, evaluating hundreds of deals, and then submitting aggressive offers left and right.
He completely relied on the law of large numbers. But, the most jarring example to me was how he built his first company.
Oh yeah, this one breaks all the rules.
He admits he had no formal business plan. None. He had zero experience or know-how in that specific sector. He had no established connections, and he had no outside funding or venture capital.
Nothing.
His only funding was the cash generated by his own daily sales.
Right. And to traditional business minds, starting a company without a business plan or operating capital sounds like pure recklessness.
It sounds insane.
It violates every single rule taught in an MBA program.
So how does someone even survive that? How do you build a company without a plan?
You substitute planning with a completely unreasonable volume of activity.
Okay.
Because he didn't have a safety net or a perfect strategy, he relied purely on overwhelming the market with sheer force of will. He didn't have time to write a 50-page business plan because he was too busy making 100 sales calls a day.
So the action becomes the plan.
Exactly. He replaced the illusion of perfect preparation with the reality of massive execution.
And this brings us to the core shift in mindset he really advocates for, which is moving from a competitive mindset to a domination mentality.
This is such a crucial pivot. Most people operate in a competitive framework.
Right.
Competing implies that you're playing on the same field by the same rules and fighting over the exact same limited market share as everyone else in your industry.
You're just trying to get your slice of the pie.
Right. You look at what your competitor is doing and you try to do it just a little bit better or maybe a little bit cheaper.
But he views the very concept of competition as a fundamental weakness, doesn't he?
He really does. If you are competing, you are allowing someone else to set the pace and define the boundaries of what is possible.
You're being reactive instead of proactive.
Exactly. The domination mentality completely rejects the idea of looking sideways. You don't look at your competitors. You don't care how many calls they are making.
They're irrelevant.
The goal is to be a model for others' thoughts and actions. You must be willing to take the actions that others simply refuse to take. You operate at such a massive, unreasonable volume that your competitors are actually forced to look at you to figure out how you are even functioning.
Wow. You want to occupy so much space in the market and in the minds of the consumers that when people think of your industry, they literally only think of you.
You become synonymous with the sector itself.
But, okay, operating at this level of domination inevitably brings up the most common and, frankly, I think the most valid fear people have when they hear this philosophy.
Which is?
The fear of absolute burnout.
Oh, sure.
Because the math here is terrifying. If I am committing to making 10 times the calls, evaluating 10 times the deals, working 10 times as hard, when do I actually get to rest?
It sounds exhausting.
Let me push you on this a bit, because he uses this analogy that success is like a breath of air. The last breath you took is important, but the next one is vital for your survival.
Right.
He also says you wouldn't consider a diet successful if you lose 10 pounds and then gain 12 back, and you can't cut your grass once and consider it successful forever. Success requires constant, perpetual maintenance.
That is his stance, yes. Success is not a static achievement. It is a continuous process.
But if I am constantly cutting the grass at a 10x level of intensity, moving at light speed just to maintain this massive empire, when do I get to sit back and enjoy the lawn?
Right. Where's the payoff?
Is Cardone just advocating for a life of perpetual grinding labor until we die? Because that honestly sounds miserable.
It is the natural conclusion to draw if you are still operating from a 1x mindset.
Maybe.
Well, if you imagine taking the draining, exhausting work you do right now and simply multiplying it by 10, of course it sounds like a recipe for a nervous breakdown.
It sounds impossible.
But Cardone clarifies that extraordinary success operates on a completely different set of physics. It builds upon itself and becomes perpetual.
Walk me through the mechanics of that. How does massive action prevent burnout instead of causing it?
Okay, so when you are operating at average levels, work feels like an exhausting grind because the payoff is small and the victories are really fleeting. You are like Sisyphus pushing a boulder up a hill, and every time you stop to rest, it threatens to roll back down and crush you. The anxiety of slipping backward is constant.
It's that treading water feeling again.
Exactly. But when you hit 10x momentum and achieve true domination, the situation changes entirely. The victories become so substantial, the financial rewards so massive, and the market dominance so complete that it generates an entirely new kind of fuel.
Well, I think he says something to the effect of, talk to anyone who is wildly successful and they will tell you it never felt like work.
Because the payoff is finally commensurate with the human potential being expended. Work feels like a soul-crushing grind to most people because the reward isn't substantial enough to yield an adequate sense of victory.
It's just a paycheck.
Right. But when you dominate an industry, your actions are fueled by passion, by legacy, by the thrill of expanding your potential. You aren't grinding to pay a light bill anymore. You are operating an empire.
I see. It's almost like the difference between pushing a stalled car by yourself on a flat road versus getting it over the crest of a massive hill where gravity finally takes over.
Oh, that's a brilliant way to picture it.
Getting it up that hill requires completely unreasonable, agonizing effort. You are straining every single muscle.
Hmm.
But once you dominate the crest of the hill, the momentum does a tremendous amount of the work for you.
You still have to steer the car, obviously. You still have to pay attention to the road and maintain the vehicle.
You can't just fall asleep at the wheel.
Right. But the grueling, bone-crushing friction of that initial push is replaced by sheer velocity. Furthermore, operating at a 10x level builds a literal fortress around your success.
How so?
You aren't just cutting the grass every weekend anymore. You have generated enough wealth to hire a landscaping crew, you've bought the entire neighborhood, and you're setting the standard for what a lawn should even look like. The very nature of the maintenance changes.
Wow. So the practical takeaway here requires a complete shift in how you view your daily operations.
Yep.
You need to transition from competing with your peers to dominating your space through a sheer, undeniable volume of constructive action.
Stop looking sideways at what everyone else is doing.
Right. Understand that success requires perpetual motion, but that motion transforms from a draining grind into exhilarating momentum once you break through the atmosphere of average.
It stops being a chore.
Don't view your goals as a finish line where you finally get to collapse. View them as new baselines from which you launch your next massive action.
It is a complete recalibration of your relationship with effort, reward, and potential.
We have covered a tremendous amount of philosophical and practical ground today.
Really?
We started by defining the true nature of the 10x rule, that it requires a simultaneous, disciplined multiplier applied to both your physical actions and your mental targets.
It's the two-part system. And we explored that fascinating paradox that living a mediocre, average life actually consumes the exact same amount of life force and energy as building an extraordinary one.
Which is still so crazy to think about.
The difference is merely the nature of the energy, draining survival versus propelling momentum.
Then we broke down why the societal conditioning to set realistic goals is mathematically and psychologically dangerous, because it leaves you with zero margin for error when inevitable resistance strikes.
Remember the road trip with exactly 3 gallons of gas?
Right. And finally, we looked at the mechanics of execution, the shift from a competitive mindset to total market domination through unreasonable volume.
And understanding that success is an ongoing intake of breath, sustained by the momentum of massive victories.
So if we tie all of these threads together, we arrive at one clear, inescapable insight that represents the core soul of Cardone's opening chapters.
And what is that?
The 10x rule is not a time management hack. It is not a cute organizational tool or a motivational quote to post on social media. It is a fundamental recalibration of human potential.
It reveals a profound truth that challenges our deepest insecurities. Our greatest threat in life isn't catastrophic failure.
Even though that's what we're all afraid of.
We spend our lives terrified of failing, of falling flat on our faces. But failure provides data. It provides a lesson. The real insidious danger is the quiet, accepted tragedy of aiming for average.
By consciously choosing to multiply your targets and your effort by 10, you force yourself out of a scarcity mindset. You manipulate the variables of your life so completely and with such overwhelming force that you make success an inevitable mathematical outcome.
Rather than waiting around for a lucky break.
Exactly. You turn achievement into a formula you can actually control.
It puts the locus of control entirely back in your hands.
Now that we've established exactly what this framework is, how the massive volume works, and why average is the absolute enemy of your potential, the next obvious question is execution.
Right, hitting the real world.
What actually happens when you start taking this massive, unreasonable action, and the world, your friends, your family, your competitors, inevitably pushes back?
Oh, they will push back.
Because massive action always creates massive friction. But we will have to leave that exploration of resistance for another deep dive.
The pushback is where the theory truly gets tested in reality.
It is. So until then, I want to leave you with one final thought to mull over, building on everything we've dissected today.
Leave them with a good one.
If taking average action only yields an average existence, leaving you completely vulnerable to the unpredictable storms of life, you really have to ask yourself a hard question.
What's that?
In a world that is constantly shifting, wildly innovating, and throwing unexpected economic and global crises at us every single day, is striving for a normal, realistic life actually the riskiest, most dangerous bet you could possibly make?
What if, right now, the real reason you aren't hitting your biggest goals has absolutely nothing to do with the economy
Right.
or, the quality of your ideas or even your raw talent? What if, instead, your failure is purely just a mathematical miscalculation of effort?
Yeah, that's a really uncomfortable thought for a lot of
It
people.
is. I mean, think about one of the most famous buildings in the world, the Sydney Opera House.
Oh, yeah, the classic example of this.
Exactly. When they first drew up the plans back in the late 1950s, the official estimate was that it would cost $7 million and take 4 years to build.
7 million.
Right. But the reality, it took 14 years and cost $102 million.
Which is just, I mean, the gap there is staggering.
It's insane. And they didn't lack architectural genius. They didn't lack vision. They just suffered from this fatal, almost biological inability to calculate the true scale of friction they were going to face.
And that inability, it isn't just a quirky feature of mid-century Australian construction projects. It's actually a fundamental feature of human psychology.
Yeah.
We have this deep-seated instinct to, look at a distant objective, visualize the absolute smoothest possible path to get there, and then we budget our time and energy based entirely on that
You
fantasy.
plan for everything going perfectly.
Exactly. And then we want to blame the market or bad luck or our competitors when we fall short. But when you strip all of those comforting excuses away, you're usually staring at a very stark, very cold mathematical reality.
You simply didn't put enough fuel in the rocket.
You didn't put enough fuel in the rocket, period.
And that stark reality is exactly what we're confronting today. We are doing a deep dive into Chapter 2 of Grant Cardone's book, The 10X Rule.
It's a heavy chapter.
It really is. The
Yeah.
chapter is bluntly titled, Why the 10X Rule is Vital. And over the course of this deep dive, you are going to learn why this chronic underestimation of effort is literally the silent killer of almost every ambition.
Yeah, and we're going to explore why operating at what the author calls 10x levels isn't just, some motivational poster slogan.
Like a hustle culture kind of thing.
Right. It's not that. It's a mandatory structural adjustment. It's really the only mathematical formula that guarantees you can survive unpredictable markets and, frankly, the overwhelming apathy of your audience.
Which is huge. And we should probably set a ground rule right now for how we're analyzing this material.
Absolutely. Because we are not treating this source material as just a hype-filled manifesto.
No, we're not.
And we aren't accepting it blindly as dogma either. We're treating it as a strategic thesis to be dissected. We really want to look under the hood here.
Yeah, we want to understand the evolutionary biology behind why we underestimate effort.
Right.
And the behavioral economics of market apathy.
Exactly. We want to know the deep psychological mechanics of why this massive multiplication of effort actually works in practice for anyone trying to build something.
So diving right in, the text opens with this rather disarming confession from the author. He states that in every single project he has ever undertaken in his entire life, he wildly underestimated the time, energy, money, and effort required.
Every single one.
Every single one. To bring the project to the point of success, he always fell short on the initial estimate.
And I love that he doesn't just limit this to corporate acquisitions or, massive sales targets.
Yeah, he gets personal with it.
He does. He explicitly points out that even his personal life, like getting his wife to date him and eventually marry him, it took 10 times more effort and energy than his initial calculation.
Which is hilarious, but also so true. It's like the classic home renovation trap.
Oh, don't even get me started.
Right. You think, I'm just going to paint the living room. It'll take a weekend, maybe $50 for paint. And a month later, you're thousands of dollars in deep knocking down drywall.
Because you found mold or the plumbing is weird.
Exactly. So let me ask you this. Why are human beings so universally terrible at estimating the effort things will take, even when we have experience?
Well, it's a revealing admission from the author because it highlights that expertise and experience do not automatically cure this blind spot. You can be 30 years into a successful career and still fall victim to what psychologists call the planning fallacy.
The planning fallacy.
Yeah, Daniel Kahneman and Amos Tversky did phenomenal work on this. They demonstrated that even when people have hard historical data showing that a specific type of project always runs over budget or over time.
Like software development.
Yes. Even with that data, people will still predict that their current project is going to be the magical exception.
In software engineering, they actually call that the happy path.
The happy path, right?
It's the scenario where a user logs in, they click the exact right buttons, they experience zero server lag, and they complete their purchase flawlessly.
Which never happened.
Never. Engineers know they can't just build for the happy path. They have to build for the user who accidentally hits the back button 3 times while their Wi-Fi drops out on a train. Yet, in our personal and professional goal setting, we almost exclusively plan for the happy path. So, biologically, why are we wired like this?
It really comes down to the evolutionary function of optimism. Because optimism isn't just a mood, it's a neurological survival mechanism.
How so?
Well, imagine early humans. If they fully comprehended the sheer, agonizing, mortal danger of hunting a mammoth,
Just the math of how likely they are to get crushed.
right? Or the danger of migrating across a frozen mountain range. If they really understood the odds, the cognitive load of that fear would have paralyzed them. They would have just stayed in the cave and starved.
Wow. Okay. That makes sense.
So our brains evolved this localized optimism bias to suppress the anticipation of friction. Basically, dopamine floods our system when we set a new goal, making us feel the reward before we've even done the work.
So that neurochemical cocktail gets us off the couch.
Yes, we are biologically programmed to be slightly delusional just so we take the first step.
That is fascinating. We literally have to lie to ourselves to survive.
But here is where the problem starts. Modern business and complex long-term goal setting, they don't work like a tribal hunt.
Right. It's not a short sprint.
Exactly. In a modern context, that biological optimism becomes a massive liability. It causes a founder to undercapitalize a startup or a manager to understaff a critical project.
Or a writer to allocate 3 months to a book that will actually take 3 years to write.
Exactly. So the 10X rule, as it's framed in this text, it's not about working 10 times harder just to, flex your work ethic for social media.
Right. It's not about burnout.
No, it acts as a manual override to our biological programming.
Yeah.
If you know that your brain's internal scale is permanently, physically tipped toward unrealistic optimism, you cannot trust your intuition.
You have to adjust the scale.
You have to manually place a massive arbitrary weight on the other side of the scale just to find baseline reality.
That is such a crucial way to look at it. It's the core utility of the rule. It forces you to acknowledge that the happy path is just a statistical anomaly. The text is demanding a structural adjustment. If you calculate that it will take 10 pitches to secure an investor, your biological optimism is lying to you.
It's lying.
You must plan for 100. If you calculate that it will cost $10,000 to build a prototype, you have to budget for $100,000. Because by doing this, you're insulating yourself against the inevitable friction of reality before it even happens.
You're building a fortress before the storm hits.
Okay, but let me challenge the practicality of that for a second. Let's say I sit down to plan a new business venture, and my realistic, highly researched spreadsheet says I need $50,000.
Okay.
And then I apply the 10X rule and say, okay, I actually need $500,000.
Right.
But I might not have $500,000. Doesn't this rule just prevent everyday people from ever starting?
It's a great question, but that realization is precisely what the rule is designed to provoke.
Wait, really? It's supposed to stop you.
Well, think about it. If multiplying your estimated effort, or capital, by 10 reveals that you do not have the resources to survive the journey, you are saving yourself from launching a doomed expedition.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. The rule forces you to realize that you either need to secure more resources before you leave the harbor, or, and this is the important part, you need to radically redesign your entire approach to require less baseline capital.
It forces innovation through constraint.
Exactly,
Yeah.
because the text makes it very clear. Underestimating your resources wouldn't be a fatal problem if you operated in a vacuum. But you don't. Your effort is never the only variable.
Which brings us directly into the chaos of the external world.
The messy world.
So messy. The second major concept we're analyzing today is the absolute inevitability of unexpected variables. The world actively resists order.
It does.
The text warns that no matter how superior your product is, no matter how incredible your service or your value proposition is, unanticipated events are not a probability, they are a certainty.
We can view this through the lens of entropy.
Entropy, like
Yeah.
in physics.
Yeah, the second law of thermodynamics. It states that closed systems naturally move from order to disorder, and the business environment is the ultimate state of entropy.
Oh, absolutely.
The very moment you launch an initiative, the environment begins acting upon it to tear it apart.
And the text gives a really sobering, almost exhausting list of the forms that entropy takes.
It's quite a list.
It is. It lists economic changes, legal matters, sudden competition, resistance from the market. It mentions banks freezing lines of credit, technology shifts that render your platform entirely obsolete overnight, strikes, and what the author simply calls people problems. And then, literally a sentence later, he adds, more people problems.
Because that's the reality. Human variables are always the most volatile.
Why is that?
Because humans introduce irrationality into your carefully planned spreadsheets. You can mathematically model a supply chain disruption, but you cannot easily model a key executive having a midlife crisis and walking out with your entire client list.
That's so true. It's the unpredictable human element. And to drive this point home, the text relies on a profound military analogy.
I love this analogy.
It's so good. It states that marching into any battle without the proper troops, supplies, ammunition, and staying power ensures defeat. It draws a very sharp line between occupying a territory and actually having the resources to keep it.
And historically, failing to understand the difference between taking and keeping territory has toppled literal empires.
Right, they stretch too thin.
Exactly. Look at almost any major military blunder where an army pushes deep into enemy territory. They win the initial skirmish, they plant their flag, but their supply lines are stretched incredibly thin because they underestimated the friction of the environment.
Like the harshness of the winter or local resistance?
Exactly. They are subsequently wiped out, not because their initial attack lacked ferocity, but because they lacked the sheer mass of sustained resources required to hold the position when the environment eventually pushed back.
And translating that territory analogy to modern goals is just fascinating. In business, occupying a territory looks like a viral social media moment.
Yeah, getting 1 million views.
Right. Or securing your first massive enterprise client, or getting a great piece of PR in a major magazine.
It feels like ultimate victory. You planned your flag.
But keeping the territory requires the infrastructure. It requires the customer support team, the server capacity, the relentless, sustained effort to service those clients.
And to fend off the sudden wave of copycats that are going to pop up.
Yes. And to survive the economic downturn that hits 6 months later, a sudden influx of success can actually destroy a company that hasn't built a 10x foundation.
We see it all the time. They captured the territory, but the administrative and operational burden of holding it just crushes them entirely.
Now, a very common reaction to reading that list of disasters, the banks freezing, legal battles, supply chain crashes, is saying, well, if I just have a massive war chest of cash, I can buy my way out of any unexpected variable.
Which is a very dangerous assumption.
But the text specifically dismantles this idea. Why doesn't cash just solve everything?
Well, it makes a vital distinction about the limitations of capital. Money is crucial, obviously, but money is a finite resource. And it burns exponentially faster when unexpected variables compound.
They compound, right. It's never just one problem.
Exactly. If a lawsuit hits at the exact same time, your primary supplier goes bankrupt, and a new competitor undercuts your pricing, your capital reserve can vanish in a matter of weeks.
Wow.
Because capital is just a static defense.
So if money isn't the ultimate safety net, what does the author suggest we rely on?
10x thinking and 10x action, because action is a dynamic defense. The author argues that operating at massive multiples of your initial target is really the only way to absorb the shock of an unpredictable reality.
It creates an operational buffer.
And a psychological one, too. Think about it. If you are making 10 times the sales calls you mathematically need to make, and you are building a pipeline 10 times larger than your baseline revenue goal, you construct an engine that generates its own momentum.
So when things go wrong, you don't stall out.
Exactly. When a bank freezes your credit line, or when 3 of your top clients suddenly pull their contracts due to a market downturn, you don't collapse.
You have a massive surplus of momentum. It's like an aircraft generating so much forward thrust that a sudden headwind doesn't stall the plane.
It just slows it down to a normal cruising speed.
That's such a great visual. Someone who only exerts average effort is flying directly at the stall speed. The slightest turbulence, one lost client, one delayed shipment, sends them crashing into the ground because they have absolutely zero margin for error.
Zero. And this requires a fundamental shift in how we view preparation. You cannot plan for every specific disaster.
You can't predict a global pandemic.
Right. Or a sudden change in international trade law, or an algorithm update that tanks your web traffic. But you can plan for the scale of disaster.
By building a 10x fortress around your goals.
Exactly. You generate so much outreach, so much product iteration, and so many diverse revenue streams that no single unexpected variable has the mass to take you down.
Which brings us to the most dangerous intersection in any pursuit. You launch your project, you hit the unexpected variables, the friction slows you down, and you are missing your initial milestones.
The critical moments.
Yes. What you do in the specific moment dictates your survival. And here, the text delivers what might be its most crucial warning: the fatal mistake of lowering targets.
This is a huge one.
The author writes that when you hit resistance and miss your target, the absolute worst possible reaction is to move the finish line. Never reduce a target. Instead, you must increase your actions.
And this is where the text heavily departs from modern conventional wisdom, right?
Completely.
To understand why the author takes such a hard line, we have to examine a fascinating psychological concept he introduces: mankind's automatic calculator.
The automatic calculator. I really want to spend a lot of time on this because it perfectly describes a phenomenon we all experience but rarely have a name for. How does this calculator function?
So the automatic calculator is a built-in, highly sophisticated psychological defense mechanism. Its sole biological purpose is to explain away failure in order to protect our ego and maintain our self-esteem.
Okay.
When we fall short of a goal, we experience cognitive dissonance. We hold two conflicting beliefs simultaneously. Belief 1: I am a competent, hardworking person. Belief 2: I failed to achieve my goal.
And that dissonance is deeply uncomfortable.
It's painful. So this internal calculator instantly powers on and starts generating variables to balance the equation and relieve that psychological pain.
But the inputs it uses are entirely self-serving, aren't they?
Completely. It almost universally blames external factors. It calculates that the economy was too soft, the timing of the launch was wrong,
The clients were too cheap.
the market wasn't ready, the algorithm changed, or the competition was fighting dirty. It points the finger at literally everything in the known universe except the one thing we actually control.
Our own action.
Right. The text points out that the automatic calculator rarely, if ever, computes that the activity level of the individual was deficient.
It's programmed with false data.
Exactly. By a society that constantly reassures us that we are doing our best, that we should play it safe, and that average outcomes are perfectly acceptable. It is the ultimate tool for rationalization.
But the real danger is that the math always looks correct to the person running the calculation, doesn't it?
That's the scariest part.
When you tell yourself, the market is down 20%, therefore it's reasonable that my sales are down 20%, you feel a profound sense of relief. The dissonance is resolved. Your ego is safe.
But your goal is dead.
Your goal is completely dead. Okay, but I am going to push back heavily on this on behalf of every manager, team leader, and frankly, every human being who has ever experienced burnout.
Fair enough. Let's hear it.
We are living in an era where we deeply understand the immense psychological toll of chronic stress. If I manage a product development team, and they are working nights and weekends, but consistently falling short of a massive aggressive goal because the supply chain is genuinely broken, doesn't lowering the target make practical sense?
It seems like it would.
Doesn't it relieve toxic stress, give them a win, and stop them from mass resigning? The modern consensus is that setting attainable milestones builds confidence, while constantly missing impossible targets destroys it.
It is absolutely the dominant management philosophy of our time. But if we look at the strategic argument in the source text, it views that exact approach as fundamentally destructive to the long-term survival of the organization.
How is giving people relief toxic, though?
Because it communicates a deeply toxic subliminal message that the goals are arbitrary and ultimately meaningless.
Oh, I see.
If a target can simply be erased and redrawn closer to where the team currently stands the moment things get difficult, then it was never a true objective. It was just a loose suggestion. The text warns that this practice of moving goalposts to manufacture a sense of success actually breeds a phenomenon psychologists call learned helplessness.
Explain how lowering a goal causes helplessness. That seems totally counterintuitive.
Think about the conditioning. If a team learns that their manager will simply lower the bar whenever they encounter severe friction, their incentive to innovate, to push past their perceived limits, or to aggressively problem solve, it's just destroyed.
So why would they burn calories trying to invent a new sales strategy when they can just wait for management to adjust the quota downward?
Exactly. It degrades their skills and their resilience.
Yeah.
The text argues that a great manager, or a great individual managing their own life, pushes for more action at the risk of falling short, rather than training themselves to aim for less.
But wait, if I keep pushing a burned-out team to hit a 10x goal they are currently failing at, won't they just quit? We see quiet quitting, everywhere right now. How do you push without breaking people?
And that is the critical nuance. The burnout you're talking about usually comes from thrashing.
Thrashing.
Yeah, exerting massive effort in a flawed system with no structural support or just being yelled at to work harder. The 10X rule, when properly applied, isn't just about demanding more sweat. It's about radically shifting the approach.
Ah,
If the supply chain is broken, 10X action doesn't mean yelling at the same supplier 10 times louder.
Right.
It means calling 100 new suppliers in adjacent industries. The toxicity of lowering targets is that it validates the excuses generated by the automatic calculator. It tells the team, you are right, the environment is too tough for us.
And the text demands the exact opposite assumption. It demands that we assume the target itself is never the problem.
Never.
The author uses a fantastic, extreme example to illustrate this mindset. He says that even visiting another planet is a perfectly attainable target. If we haven't reached a specific planet yet, we don't hold a press conference and say, that planet is realistically too far away, let's lower our target and just go to the moon again.
No, we assume that the right actions, taken in the right amounts over whatever time frame is necessary, will eventually get us there.
We say, we simply haven't built a powerful enough rocket yet. We need a new propulsion system.
Exactly. The destination remains fixed. The engineering must adapt.
Which means when you start rationalizing to yourself why a personal goal is unrealistic, or why you need to scale back your ambitions for the year because you're tired, you have to recognize that your automatic calculator is actively lying to you.
It's prioritizing your short-term emotional comfort over your long-term success.
The practical takeaway here is absolute. Adjust your engine, not your destination. If you are falling short, you need a new strategy, more fuel, more thrust, more diverse action. You do not move the finish line closer.
And this transitions us beautifully into analyzing one of the most common and frankly most insidious inputs that the automatic calculator relies on.
Ah, what's that?
It is the pervasive excuse that the market just isn't ready for an idea or that people just aren't buying right now.
The excuse of market apathy. This is where the mechanics of consumer psychology become incredibly relevant. Let's talk about what I call the enthusiasm gap.
The enthusiasm gap, yes.
This is the massive chasm between the creator's mindset and the consumer's reality. As an entrepreneur, an artist, or even just a project lead, you have immense optimism for your project. You've spent months, maybe years, agonizing over every detail. To you, it is the center of the universe.
And you naturally project that internal emotional state onto the external world. You assume the market will share that exact level of enthusiasm the very moment they're exposed to it.
But potential customers have zero enthusiasm. They don't even know your product exists yet.
Right.
They are living their own lives, dealing with their own problems, completely unaware of this masterpiece you've built in your garage.
And the author draws on decades of experience bringing products to market to highlight a really sobering truth here. He states that even if your product costs absolutely nothing to manufacture and is objectively 100 times superior to its closest competitor, you will still require 10 times the effort just to push through the noise.
And we really need to quantify that noise for a second. We aren't just talking about a crowded billboard space on a highway. We are talking about modern cognitive load.
It's heavier than ever.
The average consumer is processing thousands of marketing messages, emails, push notifications, and social media updates every single day. Their brains are actively deploying filters to ignore 99% of incoming information just to prevent cognitive overload.
Exactly. The text emphasizes that if you plan for one person to pitch your idea, or you plan to run one ad campaign thinking that's a highly efficient use of resources, you are mathematically doomed.
Because it just gets filtered out.
Yes.
Yeah.
You actually need 10 people pitching it or 10 varied campaigns just to achieve the bare minimum frequency required to penetrate that cognitive filter.
It reminds me of throwing the greatest party of the century.
Oh, I like this.
Imagine you rent out a stunning architectural venue. You hire a Michelin-star chef to bake an incredible cake. You book a world-famous DJ. The setup is objectively flawless.
Sounds great.
But you hold this party in a soundproof underground bunker, and you only send out 3 text messages as invitations.
And then you just sit in the bunker, staring at the door, wondering why the local community is rejecting your brilliant event.
But they aren't rejecting it. They have no idea it's happening. It doesn't matter how good the cake is if nobody knows the party is going on. You have to be outside, screaming from the rooftops, handing out flyers on every corner, just to get a handful of people to wander down into the bunker.
Which brings up a critical distinction the text makes regarding how we perceive failure in the market. As creators and professionals, we are absolutely petrified of rejection.
We are. It's scary.
We're terrified someone will look at our work, evaluate it, and say, this is terrible, I hate it. But the text argues that apathy is a much, much larger threat to your survival than rejection.
Because rejection requires them to actually notice you first.
Precisely. If someone takes the time to reject you, it means you have successfully penetrated their cognitive filter. They evaluated your proposition. The vast majority of the market isn't rejecting your idea, they just don't care.
They are entirely apathetic to your existence.
Yes. Apathy is a passive, heavy, deeply dense resistance. It's like trying to run a sprint through waist-deep mud. Rejection is sharp, but apathy makes you invisible. The text posits that massive 10x action is really the only force in the universe strong enough to generate the mere exposure effect required to convert market apathy into market awareness.
You have to generate enough friction to create a spark. So when you launch something, whether it's a new business or a new initiative at your corporate job, do not expect a parade.
No parades.
Expect absolute deafening silence. Assume you will have to shout 10 times louder and 10 times longer just to get a whisper of attention from your audience. You have to expect apathy and overwhelm it with sheer volume.
But sustaining that volume, constantly pushing through the waist-deep mud of apathy, and violently refusing to let your automatic calculator lower your targets when the unexpected variables hit, that requires a very specific psychological posture.
Right, you can't do that casually.
It cannot be sustained casually.
It requires what the author defines as a take-no-prisoners mindset. And let's delve into the actual attitude required to execute this, because this is where the rule moves from a mathematical equation into a behavioral philosophy.
It's the core attitude.
It's not just sitting at a desk and quietly multiplying your key performance indicators by 10 on a spreadsheet. It is a ferocious, in-it-to-win-it approach to daily action.
And the author challenges the reader with a deeply profound visualization exercise to cultivate this mindset. He instructs you to act as if an invisible camera is recording every single step of your day.
Like a documentary.
But not just for a documentary. He says to imagine this footage will be used as the mandatory instructional model for your children and grandchildren on exactly how to succeed in life.
Oh, wow. That immediately changes the weight of your actions.
It alters your posture completely. If you knew your descendants were watching how you handle a dropped client call or a technical failure, you wouldn't slump your shoulders and complain. You wouldn't run the automatic calculator.
No, you'd step up.
He says you must attack everything with the ferociousness of a champion athlete on their final attempt to make history.
Okay, but again, I have to play the skeptic for the listener here. Isn't a take-no-prisoners mindset incredibly intense for everyday people?
Some might say that.
If I'm just trying to build a small local bakery, or I'm trying to get a standard promotion to middle management, do I really need to act like a gladiator in the Colosseum? Doesn't that mindset make you ruthless, arrogant, and just alienate everyone around you?
That is the most common misinterpretation of this philosophy. Yes. People here take no prisoners, and they assume it means being hostile and combative toward other people. They think it means crushing their coworkers, acting unethically toward competitors, or becoming a tyrant. But that is a complete misreading of the text's intent.
Who exactly are you taking prisoner then?
You are being relentlessly, violently hostile to your own urge to quit.
Oh.
You are taking no prisoners when it comes to your own excuses and your own automatic calculator. It is entirely an internal ferocity. It is about following through to absolute completion.
So it's about endurance.
Exactly. The text explicitly states that following through completely is the great common denominator of all winners. They do not leave things half-finished. They see every single action through to its ultimate conclusion, regardless of the friction.
So it is an internal war against complacency, not an external war against your peers.
Exactly. And this internal ferocity ties into another fascinating layer of the text, the concept of luck. We often look at highly successful individuals, people who land the massive contract or get the viral break, and our automatic calculator tells us, wow, they just got lucky, they were in the right place at the right time.
It's the ultimate ego protection. If they just got lucky, then my lack of success isn't my fault.
But the author's perspective mathematically dismantles that. His view is that people who are getting lucky are simply taking massive 10x actions that dramatically increase their surface area for a lucky break to hit.
The surface area of luck, I like that.
If you make one sales call a week, your statistical chances of a serendipitous lucky connection are practically zero. But if you make 1,000 calls a week, You are practically guaranteeing that you will eventually stumble into a lucky alignment of timing, need, and opportunity.
You are engineering serendipity through sheer volume. Luck isn't magic. It's directly proportional to your output. The more actions you take, the wider you cast your net, the more likely you are to catch a lucky break.
You cannot control the timing of luck, but you have absolute control over the probability of it occurring.
So what does this all mean for you right now as you listen to this? I want to challenge you to actually adopt that visualization from the text for the rest of today. Imagine that invisible camera is floating over your shoulder.
Just for today.
Imagine the footage of how you handle your next obstacle will be shown to the next generation as the definitive guide on how to attack goals. Are your actions today worthy of that video? Are you showing them how to push through the mud of apathy, or are you modeling how to efficiently run the automatic calculator and lower the target?
It is a profound, uncomfortable way to audit your daily behavior. It strips away the illusion of effort and forces you to look at your actual output.
As we bring this deep dive to a close, let's synthesize everything we've unpacked from Chapter 2 of the 10X Rule. How do all these psychological and strategic threads weave together into the core thesis?
If we pull back and look at the entire landscape we've discussed, the soul of this chapter is this. The 10X Rule is not a time management trick, and it is not a motivational platitude. It is a vital, holistic philosophy of survival in a hostile environment.
A survival manual.
Yes. It begins with a humble acknowledgement that human beings are biologically wired to underestimate the friction of reality. Because the world is chaotic, unpredictable, and largely indifferent to your goals, operating at average levels leaves you entirely exposed.
Which means we need a buffer.
Exactly. Therefore, operating at 10x levels serves two non-negotiable functions. First, it acts as an impenetrable defensive shield, a massive buffer of resources and momentum that protects you against the unexpected variables of life, the economic swings, the bad luck, the sudden friction.
And the second function.
Second, it serves as an overwhelming offensive weapon against the dense, heavy apathy of the marketplace. It is the only mathematical formula that guarantees you won't just temporarily occupy a territory, but that you will have the mass to keep it permanently.
It truly is a survival manual for anyone with ambition. And now that we understand exactly why operating at these 10x levels is the only mathematical way to survive the journey, we are forced to look in the mirror and ask a much deeper, much more existential question.
What are we actually journeying toward?
Exactly. Why survive the friction at all? In the next chapter, we'll redefine the very nature of success itself and explore why achieving it isn't just a preference, but an ethical obligation.
But before you step back into the noise of your day, I want to leave you with one final thought to examine. Think about the last major goal you abandoned, the business you didn't start, the project you shelved, the fitness routine you dropped.
We all have one.
We do. Look very closely at the story you currently tell yourself about why it didn't work out. If you strip away all the comforting excuses about bad timing, a soft economy, or just plain bad luck, how close were you really to applying 10 times the effort before you let yourself off the hook?
So I want you to just think back for a second to a very specific moment in your recent past. A moment where you set a goal, a really meaningful, measurable target, and you just completely missed it.
Oh, we've all been there. It's a terrible feeling.
Right. I want you to sit with that uncomfortable feeling for just a second. Maybe it was, I don't know, a sales target for your business that you absolutely swore you'd hit by the end of Q3.
Or maybe a timeline for launching a new product that just, well, kept slipping and slipping.
Exactly. Or perhaps it was something deeply personal, like a fitness milestone you were just absolutely certain you would crush by the summer. And when the dust finally settled and you realized you fell short, what was the very first thing your brain did?
That's the million-dollar question right there.
Yeah. What was the immediate narrative that formed in your head? If you were like, well, the vast majority of us, you didn't point the finger inward.
No, of course not. We never do.
You pointed it outward, you blamed the economy, you blamed bad timing, you looked at your team and found faults in their execution, or you just threw your hands up and chalked the whole endeavor up to this mysterious, uncontrollable force called bad luck.
Bad luck. The ultimate scapegoat.
Right. But I want to challenge you with a deeply provocative thought right at the top of this deep dive. What if the target you set wasn't the problem at all? What if your failure was simply a catastrophic miscalculation of the effort required?
Wow. I mean, that is the kind of question that forces a complete rewiring of how you view the world, honestly.
It really is.
Because it strips away that comforting blanket of external variables that we so often use to protect our ego, We love to build this narrative where we are the victims of circumstance.
We really do. It feels safe.
It does feel safe. But when you strip away those excuses, you are left with a rather stark, undeniable mathematical reality. The premise we are unpacking today suggests that the universe operates on this fundamental friction, and your failure wasn't a matter of destiny. It was a failure of multiplication.
A failure of multiplication. I love that phrasing. And that mathematical reality is the entire foundation of what we are getting into today.
It absolutely is.
So, in this deep dive, we are dissecting the core of our source material to answer one crucial question, which is why the 10x rule is vital.
And it is vital. It's not optional.
Right. You are about to learn why underestimating effort is the absolute root cause of almost every single business failure you will ever experience.
Every single one.
We are going to explore why multiplying your actions by 10 isn't just some glossy motivational catchphrase thrown around at seminars. It is, in fact, the ultimate insurance policy against a completely unpredictable and inherently chaotic world.
Yeah, and it represents a total paradigm shift. I mean, if you have any interest whatsoever in business entrepreneurship or, frankly, just achieving any ambitious goal in your life, the concepts in this chapter will fundamentally alter how you view resistance.
They really will.
It is designed to move you from being a passive victim of your circumstances to becoming this active, overwhelming force in your own life. The author makes this super compelling case that success is not some naturally occurring phenomenon.
Doesn't just happen to you.
Exactly. It's an unnatural state. It must be forced into existence through sheer volume of action.
Through sheer volume of action. So let's dive straight into the foundational premise here. And honestly, it's a bit of a blow to the human ego, especially for those of us who, pride ourselves on being really logical planners.
Oh, absolutely. The planners hate this part.
They do, because the core idea presented in the text is that we, as a species, are notoriously, embarrassingly terrible at estimating the time, energy, money, and effort required to make literally any project successful.
We are so bad at it. The source material is completely unequivocal on this point. We are universally inept at this specific type of forecasting.
Inept is the perfect word.
And what gives this argument so much weight, I think, is that the author doesn't place himself above the critique. He opens with this very candid, almost vulnerable personal confession.
Yeah, which you don't see often in these types of books.
Not at all. He states, for the record, that in every single project he has ever been involved in throughout his decades of business experience, he has underestimated the requirements.
Wait, every single project?
Every single one. He doesn't claim to be immune to this human flaw. He simply learned how to compensate for it.
Which is incredibly refreshing, right? Because we so rarely hear wildly successful business leaders admit that their initial projections were just completely wrong.
It's usually the opposite. They claim they foresaw everything.
Exactly. They claim they were visionaries. But he gives this highly specific example from his own career. He notes that whenever he targeted a new client or a new business sector, it always, without a single exception, took 10 times more mail, 10 times more phone calls, 10 times more emails, and 10 times more personal contacts than he had originally predicted in his pristine, beautifully formatted business plan.
Ah, the beautiful business plan. That is so often the trap, right?
It looks so good on paper.
It looks perfect on paper. The spreadsheet balances perfectly. The revenue projections go up and to the right in a beautiful, uninterrupted line.
That's a gorgeous hockey stick growth curve.
Exactly. But a spreadsheet exists in a vacuum. It assumes a completely frictionless environment. It completely fails to account for the massive amount of inertia and apathy that exists in the real world.
Yeah, the real world doesn't care about your spreadsheet.
It doesn't. When you map out a project, you are mapping out the absolute best-case scenario. You're assuming everyone will return your calls on the first try, every piece of software will work flawlessly, and the market is just sitting there eagerly waiting to hand you money for your solution.
Which is never the case. And he even brings this concept into his personal life, which I found hilarious, but also profoundly illustrative.
Oh, the wife story. I love this part.
Yes. He talks about how long it took to get his wife to date him and eventually marry him. He literally calculated how much effort it would take to win her over.
Which is a very business-minded way to approach romance, frankly.
Very analytical. But it turned out that it took 10 times more effort, 10 times more energy and persistence than he initially mapped out.
Yeah, and he is careful to note that the result was worth every ounce of that massive effort. But it perfectly illustrates the underlying mechanism here.
It really does.
Whether you are trying to win market share from an entrenched competitor or win the heart of the person you love, your initial baseline estimation of the energy required is almost certainly going to be a fraction of what reality actually demands of you.
Which makes me want to pause and just float a theory here, because I think it's vital to understand the why behind this. Why are we so universally bad at this specific type of math?
It's a great question.
Think about it. Human beings have engineered bridges that span miles of open water.
We have?
We've navigated spacecraft to other planets. We've mapped the human genome. We are capable of staggering, unbelievable precision. How is it possible that we can be so utterly delusional about something as basic as how many cold calls it takes to land a mid-level corporate client?
It's quite the paradox, isn't it?
It is. Is this just a cultural blind spot, or are we dealing with some kind of hardwired evolutionary survival mechanism? Because, I mean, if early humans knew exactly how many miles they'd have to track a mammoth before a successful hunt, they might have just stayed in the cave and starved.
I think that evolutionary angle is a brilliant way to frame it. And it aligned perfectly with the author's broader observations. The text points out that this delusion is not isolated to just one industry.
It's everywhere.
It is everywhere. The author's firm consults with thousands of individuals and companies across every conceivable sector. We're talking about contractors building custom houses, high-powered lawyers fighting multi-year legal battles,
Right.
individuals trying to land their dream jobs, or producers trying to get an independent movie off the ground. And the consensus is absolutely staggering. Literally, no one gets the initial estimation right.
Wait, no one out of thousands of data points across all these different industries.
Zero. Because achieving these complex goals often appears deceptively simple to those who are on the outside looking in. This is what we call the illusion of competence.
The illusion of competence. Tell me more about that.
Well, when you sit in a theater and watch a beautifully paced, finished movie, or you walk through a perfectly constructed home, or you read a profile about a wildly successful CEO in a magazine, the finished product completely hides the friction of its creation.
Oh, that makes so much sense. It hides the messy middle.
Exactly. It hides the agonizing late nights, the sudden legal hurdles, the funding that fell through at the last minute, the sheer crushing volume of rejection. Everyone assumes their path will be as smooth as the finished products they consume.
Because that's all they see.
Right. But those inside the arena, the ones actually building the things, they know the brutal, exhausting truth.
So it sounds like we suffer from a profound survivorship bias mixed with that illusion of competence. We only see the polished outcome. We never see the thousands of invisible, agonizing failures that preceded it.
Never.
So when we set out to build our own house, so to speak, we budget for the polished outcome. We don't budget for the hidden chaos.
That is the exact mechanism at play. If you knew on day one of your new business venture the sheer terror of what was actually required, that it was going to take 10 straight years of 80-hour work weeks, a second mortgage on your home, navigating a global pandemic, and surviving 3 severe market crashes,
You'd run away.
you might never take that first step. So, from a psychological standpoint, that initial burst of optimistic delusion might actually be a necessary catalyst just to get us off the starting block.
That's fascinating. The delusion is a feature, not a bug initially.
Initially, yes. However, the critical warning in this chapter is that if you hold on to that delusion once the race begins, if you refuse to update your mental model to the 10x reality, the friction will inevitably destroy you.
Which brings us to the practical application for the person listening to this right now. The takeaway here requires a total, immediate recalibration of your baseline expectation.
A total reset.
Right. The directive is to assume, right at this exact second, that whatever endeavor you are currently planning, whether it's launching a podcast, asking for a promotion, or building a startup, it is going to take 10 times more effort than you have currently mapped out in your head.
And it functions as a radical defensive strategy for your own psychology. The logic is totally bulletproof.
How so?
Well, think about it. It is infinitely better to budget 10x the energy, 10x the time, and 10x the financial resources up front, and perhaps be pleasantly surprised if the project only takes 7x or 8x the effort.
Right. Then you're thrilled.
Exactly. That is so much better than budgeting 1x energy and facing crushing, paralyzing disappointment when you hit a brick wall on week 2. You are essentially pre-funding your emotional resilience account.
Pre-funding your emotional resilience. I love that, because hitting that wall isn't a possibility, is it? It's a certainty.
Absolute certainty.
And that connects directly to the next major concept the author explores. We don't merely fail because we underestimate our own internal fatigue or our own capacity for work. We fatally underestimate the absolute relentless chaos of the outside world.
Yes, the outside world does not care about your plans.
It really doesn't. And this introduces us to the danger of relying on the myth of the flawless plan.
The author issues a very stark, uncompromising warning here. He states that no matter how undeniably superior your product is, no matter how flawless your service or how compelling your business proposition might be, unanticipated resistance will strike.
It will strike.
It is not a matter of if, but when and how hard.
And the list of unpredictable forces he mentions in the text, it's practically a parade of anxiety for any business owner.
It really is a nightmare list.
Right. He explicitly lists economic changes, unforeseen legal matters, sudden and aggressive competition.
Yep, competitors coming out of nowhere.
Exactly. Banks abruptly freezing up and refusing to lend capital. Massive technology shifts that can make your flagship product completely obsolete overnight.
Look at what AI is doing right now.
Oh, perfect example. And then he lists people problems. And then he takes a moment to explicitly emphasize more people problems because human variables are the most volatile.
Humans are messy.
They are, followed by elections, wars, and labor strikes. I mean, it's a lot.
What he is describing is a highly complex, chaotic system. And the core disconnect that leads to failure is that the creator of a project is naturally brimming with optimism.
Of course. It's your baby.
It's your baby. You are deeply emotionally invested in your idea. You see its brilliant potential, you know every feature, and you believe it can change the world.
Right.
But you have to realize that your potential customers are not sharing that optimism. They are, at best, entirely apathetic to your existence.
Apathetic. That's a harsh word, but it's true.
It's the truth. They don't even know your product is on the market yet, and more importantly, they have no inherent burning desire to change their current comfortable habits just to adopt your new solution.
Because change is hard.
Change is exhausting for consumers.
The author uses this incredibly vivid analogy to drive this point home, and it's one that really shifts the perspective. He says that going into business is akin to marching into battle.
It's a very heavy metaphor.
It is.
But it's a deeply accurate one regarding resource allocation.
Right. He argues that if you march into battle without the proper troops, without surplus supplies, without excess ammunition, and without the psychological staying power to endure a long campaign, you will inevitably return home defeated. Period.
No question about it.
And he makes a fascinating distinction here. He says it's not enough to simply occupy a territory, which, in business terms might mean launching a shiny new website, securing a patent, or opening a physical storefront.
Right, planting the flag.
Yeah, planting the flag. But you must possess the overwhelming resources required to keep that territory once the counterattacks begin.
And that distinction between occupying and keeping, that is the graveyard of most startups.
The graveyard. Wow.
It is. Because launching a business is merely occupying a space. Anyone can build a landing page and occupy a digital square foot. It takes an afternoon.
Literally a few hours on Shopify.
Exactly. But surviving the first 3 years of erratic market fluctuations, navigating global supply chain collapses, and fending off aggressive, well-funded competitors who want to crush you, that is the brutal reality of keeping the territory. And you simply cannot maintain a defensive perimeter, let alone expand, on a 1x supply line.
I hear what you're saying, and I get the battle analogy, but I want to push back on this premise just a bit.
Sure, go for it.
Because I think there's a counter-argument that a lot of maybe tech-focused listeners might be screaming at their speakers right now. Let's look at it through the lens of pure product supremacy. What if my product is genuinely, undeniably revolutionary? What if I have engineered a piece of software that costs almost nothing to replicate, and it is objectively 100 times better, faster, and cheaper than the closest competition? We've seen massive companies grow through word of mouth. Doesn't a truly great, transcendent product eventually just sell itself because the market naturally demands the best?
It is deeply tempting to believe that. And admittedly, we do see rare anomalies where a viral product seems to explode overnight based purely on its utility.
Right, like we see the headlines all the time.
We do. But the author's framework addresses this directly. He warns that the build it and they will come mentality is perhaps the single most dangerous myth taught in modern business schools.
The most dangerous myth.
Yes. Because even with a flawless, completely free, vastly superior product, you still have to apply massive 10x effort just to pierce the veil of obscurity.
Really? Even if it's vastly superior.
Even then. Because those anomalies you mentioned, what we don't see is the 10x back-end architecture. We don't see the relentless behind-the-scenes lobbying, the aggressive poaching of top engineering talent, and the massive server costs they had to endure to survive their own viral growth.
So even if the product is a miracle, the market's default state is just blindness and deafness to it.
Precisely. The modern marketplace is an incredibly hostile, noisy environment. The average consumer is bombarded with thousands of sophisticated marketing messages every single day.
I mean, just open your phone for 5 minutes.
Exactly. Their attention spans are fractured, they're stressed, they're distracted, and they're inherently skeptical of any new claims because they've been let down before.
We've all bought the thing that promised to change our lives and it ended up in the junk drawer.
Exactly. You cannot just casually whisper your brilliant idea into a hurricane and expect anyone to hear it. Furthermore, money alone cannot solve this apathy. You cannot simply buy your way to sustained market dominance with a massive ad budget if the underlying action isn't there. Only massive, relentless, multi-channel action can generate enough friction to break through that wall of noise.
So the practical application for the listener is a harsh reality check on timelines. If you want to compress the time it takes to get an idea to market, you cannot rely on the sheer brilliance or novelty of the idea to act as an accelerant.
Nope, that won't work.
You must deploy 10x resources. If your original comfortable business plan had one key salesperson pitching this idea to venture capitalists or potential enterprise clients, you need to immediately plan on having 10 people pitching it simultaneously in order to speed up the timeline and guarantee market penetration.
Right. However, the author inserts a critical caveat here that we really must address. There's a secondary cost to this strategy.
Okay, what is it?
You must recognize that deploying 10 people instead of one will inevitably cost 10 times more money in payroll and operational expenses. And far more importantly, it will require 10 times more management bandwidth, training, and leadership on your part.
Right, you have to manage all those people.
Exactly. There is no biological or economic free lunch here. You are actively trading intense, massive action, and heavy resource allocation for speed and dominance.
Which is a terrifying realization if your entire mental model was built around this low-effort, high-reward fantasy.
It shatters that fantasy completely.
It does. And once we accept that the battlefield is this chaotic, apathetic void that demands overwhelming resources just to survive the opening bell, we have to examine what happens to our internal state.
This is where it gets really interesting.
Yeah. What actually happens to our psychology and our physiology when we inevitably hit that fierce, immovable wall of resistance and we don't have a 10x plan in place to absorb the shock?
This is where the text transitions from strategic planning into the very real physical and psychological toll of miscalculation.
Physical toll.
Yes. When you severely underestimate the energy required to achieve a goal, and you step into the arena only to encounter that brutal 10x market resistance, a profound shift happens within you. You become visibly disappointed. The discouragement isn't just a fleeting thought, it takes root in your system.
The author makes an incredible observation here that I think anyone who has ever managed people or even just managed themselves will recognize instantly. He points out that this discouragement isn't just an internal monologue, it manifests physically.
Oh, absolutely.
You literally quit in your mind, but that surrender bleeds out into your physiology. You quit in your posture. You quit in the tone and cadence of your voice. You quit in your facial expressions and your overall presentation.
It is a direct physiological response to a massive cognitive dissonance.
Okay, break that down for me. Cognitive dissonance.
Well, your brain expected an easy win, and instead it was met with immense friction. Think of it in terms of weightlifting. If you approach a barbell believing it weighs 20 pounds, and you apply 20 pounds of upward force, but the barbell actually weighs 500 pounds,
yeah.
your body experiences a shock.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
You don't just gently realize you are wrong. Your muscles literally give out, your posture slumps, and you physically give up on the lift. You might even hurt yourself.
Because you weren't braced for it.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Now, translate that physical shock into the boardroom. Imagine experiencing that exact physiological slump in the middle of a high-stakes sales call or during a critical pitch to angel investors simply because they pushed back harder than you anticipated.
You literally look and sound defeated to the marketplace.
You do.
And if there is one thing we know about the marketplace, it acts very much like a predator. It has a highly developed sense for weakness.
It can smell blood in the water.
It really can.
Mm.
If your shoulders are slumped and your voice lacks conviction, if you sound like you don't even believe you possess the energy to overcome their objections, why on earth would the customer risk their capital to believe in you?
They won't. They absolutely won't. Conversely, correctly estimating the massive 10x effort required gives you the appropriate physiological posture.
It's a posture of success.
Exactly. If you walk up to that barbell already knowing in your bones that it weighs 500 pounds, your approach is entirely different.
You're ready for it.
You brace your core, you plant your feet, you bring leverage, you might even bring a team to help you lift it. You attack the problem.
And people see that.
The marketplace, clients, and competitors instantly sense this preparedness. They read your posture and your tone, and they instinctively respond to you as a force to be reckoned with. They realize very quickly that you are not going away, and that relentless presence forces them to engage with you.
This dynamic is perfectly illustrated by the author's own massive professional pivot described in the text. He details a period in his career where he was deeply struggling, basically just barely keeping his head above water.
Yeah, he was in a really tough spot.
And the turning point came when he finally stopped calculating all the comfortable external reasons for his lack of results. He stopped blaming the macroeconomy, he stopped blaming the quality of his client list, and he made a unilateral commitment to increase his daily efforts by 10x.
He audited his own activity levels and made a drastic mechanical change to his inputs. The text notes that he went from making a comfortable 2 to 3 sales calls a day to aggressively making 20 to 30 calls a day.
Now, here is where the text introduces a mathematical reality that I want to dissect deeply, because it initially seems completely counterintuitive.
Okay.
He put in exactly 10 times the effort, going from 3 calls to 30 calls, but he explicitly notes that this 10x burst of effort only yielded 4 times the actual result.
Yes, the 10 to 4 ratio. It is perhaps the most profound insight in the entire chapter regarding how the world actually works.
You have to stop and play the role of the frustrated entrepreneur here for a second.
Please do.
Because if I look at that 10 to 4 ratio, my immediate reaction is that the math is broken. He put in 10x the effort, but only got 4x the results. In any normal logical business calculation, isn't that a terrible return on investment?
It feels like it, doesn't it?
It sounds like orbital mechanics, where you burn 90% of your fuel just fighting gravity in the first 2 minutes of flight. Why would anyone willingly agree to expend 10 units of energy if they are only going to receive 4 units of payoff? It feels like the universe is heavily taxing your effort.
The universe is taxing your effort. That is a brilliant way to conceptualize it. And that gravitational tax actually proves the exact point the author is making about market resistance. The underlying truth is that the real world does not yield a linear one-to-one return on your effort. It never has, and it never will.
So the 6x that goes missing, that's the friction.
Yes. To build on your point about gravity, the 6x is the fuel burned just to achieve escape velocity.
Escape velocity.
Right. It's consumed by the friction of the market, the apathy of the consumer, the noise of competitors, the economic downturns, and all those unpredictable variables we listed earlier. The environment is inherently, ruthlessly inefficient.
Wow.
The 10x action is strictly necessary just to achieve that 4x breakthrough. If you demand a perfect, fair, one-to-one return on your energy, you will quickly become embittered, frustrated, and you will quit.
And feel cheated.
Exactly. But you have to look at the absolute value of the result. A 4x increase in your ultimate output, 4 times the gross revenue, 4 times the market share, 4 times the impact, is an absolute life-changing quantum leap for any business.
That's massive.
But that leap demands a disproportionate, overwhelming 10x input, simply to force the stubborn machinery of the market to yield.
That reframes the entire concept of exhaustion. You aren't getting cheated out of the other 6x of your effort. That 6x is simply the toll you pay to reality just for the privilege of playing the game.
It is the non-negotiable cost of doing business in a universe that inherently resists change.
So the immediate practical takeaway for you regarding this concept is an exercise in ruthless self-awareness. Tomorrow, or even later today, when you are facing a severe business challenge, a combative client, or a project that seems to be spiraling out of control, I want you to step outside yourself and monitor your own posture and your own voice.
Yes, you must treat your physiology as a real-time dashboard of your internal estimations.
Exactly. If you feel your physical presence shrinking, your shoulders rounding forward, or if you hear your own voice taking on a defeated, whiny, or defensive tone, you must recognize that as a diagnostic signal.
A warning light on the dashboard.
Right. That physical slump does not mean your goal is unattainable, and it does not mean your strategy is fundamentally flawed. It simply means your math was wrong.
Your math was wrong.
You miscalculated the effort required. You brought 1x energy to a problem that strictly demands 10x energy.
And unfortunately, when individuals and teams experience that creeping sense of defeat, when they feel that 6x tax of reality bearing down on them, it almost inevitably triggers the single most destructive, toxic reaction in all of management and personal goal setting.
Oh man, this is the trap. This is where companies slowly die from the inside out. The irresistible desire to lower the bar.
The fatal trap of lowering targets. The author addresses this disastrous instinct head-on because it is so incredibly pervasive in corporate culture.
It really is. He describes this classic, incredibly specific scenario that anyone who has ever worked in a corporate sales environment knows intimately. Picture it. It's midway through the quarter.
I can picture it already.
The sales managers are huddled in a conference room looking at the CRM dashboard, and the math is undeniable. The team is pacing far behind, and they are not going to hit their quota. So what is the standard corporate response? They call an all-hands meeting.
The dreaded all-hands meeting. And under the guise of empathy, team cohesion, and keeping everyone motivated, leadership makes a fatal error. They lower the target.
They shrink it.
They adjust the quarterly quota down to a safe, comparable number that the team is already on track to hit anyway, just to ensure that everyone gets to ring a bell, collect a nominal bonus, and feel good about themselves before the weekend.
The author lays down an absolute non-negotiable law regarding this practice. You must never, under any circumstances, reduce a target.
Never. Because the moment you authorize the lowering of a goal, you are actively activating mankind's built-in automatic excuse calculator.
The excuse calculator, I think that is one of the most accurate phrases in the entire book.
It perfectly describes a psychological mechanism that every single human being possesses. And we have to understand that this calculator is entirely emotional, not logical.
How does it work?
Well, its pure sole design is to generate a plausible narrative to explain away failure in order to protect our fragile self-esteem. When the brain encounters the stress of failing, it burns a massive amount of mental energy.
It's exhausting.
Right. The excuse calculator is essentially a neurological survival mechanism. It lowers the target to relieve cognitive dissonance and conserve energy. It is an ego protection algorithm.
And what's fascinating is that it spits out these pre-programmed, universally accepted phrases. It's like our software has been loaded with these virus definitions by the media, by our peers, and by our upbringing.
Okay.
When we miss a goal, the excuse calculator immediately prints out receipts that say things like, well, the market just isn't ready for a product like this yet, or the macroeconomic climate is just too turbulent right now.
Or consumers don't really want premium services anymore.
Right. Or the absolute most dangerous output of all. Our initial targets were simply unrealistic.
Unrealistic. That is the excuse calculator's favorite, most insidious word, because it masquerades as wisdom.
It sounds so mature.
Does it?
But let's test that premise against the reality of human management. Let me challenge this from the perspective of a team leader.
Bring it on.
If you are managing a group of 30 people and they are clearly going to miss their targets despite working weekends, and you can see the burnout in their eyes, won't leaving the target impossibly high completely destroy their morale? Doesn't a competent, emotionally intelligent leader need to inject a dose of realism into the system to keep their team engaged and prevent a mass exodus?
It is a very common concern, and the author leans heavily into this exact dilemma. His answer is completely uncompromising. Changing the finish line midway through the race sends a deeply toxic, irreversible message to your entire organization.
An irreversible message.
Yes. It subconsciously signals to your team that targets are fundamentally unimportant, that they are arbitrary numbers plucked from thin air, and that leadership lacks the conviction to stand by them.
Oh, wow. It essentially trains the team to expect the goalposts to move whenever they start breathing hard. It conditions them to negotiate the goal rather than execute the action.
Exactly. To build on your point, it actually causes a further weakening of morale, a profound loss of hope, a permanent lowering of expectations, and ultimately a degradation of the team's core skills.
Because why bother getting better?
Precisely. Think about the incentive structure. If the target will simply be lowered to meet my current inadequate skill level, why would I ever invest the painful effort required to improve my skills?
You wouldn't.
The author argues forcefully that a truly great, visionary manager is willing to risk the team coming up short, missing the bonus, and facing the harsh reality of the scoreboard, rather than ever committing the sin of lowering the standard.
That is tough love.
It is. The entire 10X rule operates on one unbreakable fundamental assumption. The target is never the problem. The failure to achieve the target is always, always a failure of activity.
That is a staggering standard to hold yourself to. The target is never the problem. So your practical takeaway for this concept is to draw a hard, permanent line in the sand regarding your own goals. When you inevitably fail to hit a milestone, and if you are setting proper 10x goals, you will occasionally miss them. You must absolutely refuse to move the goalposts closer to make yourself feel better.
You do not shrink the goal to fit your comfort zone. You must expand your action to meet the goal.
Exactly. You must isolate the problem.
Right.
You solely analyze your activity levels. You look at the cold, hard math of what you actually did on a daily basis. You acknowledge that the input was insufficient for the friction of the market, and then you mechanically multiply your actions. You leave the target exactly where it is, towering above you.
But we must acknowledge that sustaining that kind of relentless, borderline obsessive push to refuse to lower the target while constantly fighting off the whispers of your own emotional excuse calculator requires a highly specific psychological framework.
It sounds exhausting.
It is. You cannot just white-knuckle your way through a decade of business using willpower alone. Willpower depletes. You have to adopt a foundational mindset that generates its own energy to carry you through that 6x friction tax we discussed earlier.
Which brings us perfectly to the final and perhaps most intense key idea in this chapter, the life depends on it mindset, and the author's controversial truth about the nature of luck.
This represents the final psychological requirement of the 10x rule. The author describes it as adopting a permanent take-no-prisoners attitude toward your objectives.
Take no prisoners.
Yes. He states that you must tackle every single project, every routine phone call, every mundane client meeting, as though your literal life and the survival of your deepest dreams depend entirely on the outcome of that specific action.
He places a massive emphasis on the concept of absolute follow-through.
He really does.
He notes that the great common denominator of all winners across all fields, whether in business, athletics, or the arts, isn't innate God-given talent. And it certainly isn't being born with a silver spoon. The defining characteristic is that they see every single action completely through to its absolute completion. They leave zero loose ends. They leave nothing half done.
And this intense focus on volume and completion naturally brings up the concept of luck, which is the ultimate external excuse.
Oh, people love to use luck as an excuse.
They do. People who operate at a 1x level love to look at these massive winners who are taking 10x action, and they dismiss their success by saying, well, they were just in the right place at the right time. They just got lucky.
It's a way to let themselves off the hook.
Exactly. Now, the author doesn't deny the existence of luck. He acknowledges that unpredictable, fortuitous events certainly occur. But he argues that luck is not an arbitrary lightning bolt that strikes the lazy and the hardworking equally.
Not at all.
If you interview the people who consistently get lucky, they will tell you that their luck is directly, mathematically proportional to the volume of action they have taken.
It's the old adage, right? The harder I work, the luckier I seem to get. But it's actually just probability.
It is pure probability. If you make 10 outbound phone calls, you have exactly 10 chances to stumble into a lucky break, maybe catching a CEO in an unusually good mood.
Right.
But if you make 1,000 phone calls, you have 1,000 chances to get lucky. You are mechanically, systematically increasing the surface area of your life for luck to strike.
Increasing the surface area for luck. I love that. To really cement this mindset, the author uses this illustrative analogy that I found incredibly sobering. He calls it the camera analogy.
Oh, this one is intense.
It is. He asks the reader to imagine that every single step of your process, every moment of your workday, is being meticulously recorded by a professional camera crew following you around. You are the star of a documentary about your own life.
But the stakes of this documentary are incredibly high.
Very high.
This footage won't just be broadcast on television. The specific footage will be preserved and used as the ultimate instructional model. It is the definitive video that your children, and eventually your grandchildren, will be forced to watch in order to learn exactly how to succeed in life.
I have to react to the sheer intensity of that framing.
It gets hard, doesn't it?
It really does, because a take no prisoners, life or death attitude, where you are operating under the assumption that your unborn grandchildren are harshly judging your Tuesday afternoon email response times.
Yeah.
Honestly, that sounds incredibly aggressive. For a lot of people, that sounds like a recipe for a nervous breakdown. It sounds exhausting to apply that to everyday, mundane business tasks.
It is aggressive. It is intensely demanding. And the author completely anticipates that exact reaction from the reader. His sentiment in the text is unapologetic.
What does he say?
He essentially says, does this sound too aggressive? Sorry, but that is the exact outlook required to win in today's environment.
He offers zero apologies for the intensity.
None whatsoever, because he understands the alternative. The alternative is average effort, and the math dictates that average passive behavior yields, at best, average passive results. In a world completely saturated with noise, resistance, and well-funded competitors, average effort isn't a safe middle ground. It is basically a guarantee of a slow, painful failure.
Wow.
He insists that you must attack your daily goals with the ferociousness of a champion athlete in the final moments of claiming a historic victory. Think of an Olympic sprinter in the final 10 meters of the gold medal race.
Right, they aren't holding anything back.
They aren't holding anything in reserve. They aren't worried about burnout. They are giving absolutely everything their physiology can produce because history is on the line. The 10X mindset requires applying that exact level of ferocity to a standard Tuesday afternoon client pitch.
So here is your final, highly actionable, practical takeaway, and it requires a brutal, unflinching self-audit. I want you to look at your daily actions today. Not your grand intentions, not the beautiful plans sitting on your hard drive, but what you actually did with the hours you were given.
Yes, the cold, hard reality of your day.
If a camera crew had been recording your work ethic today, tracking every moment you scrolled social media instead of making a call, every time you lowered a target to feel better, and that raw, unedited footage was going to be used to teach your grandchildren how to build a legacy, would you be proud to sit in the room and show them that footage?
That's a heavy question.
Or would you be deeply embarrassed by your lack of effort and your willingness to surrender to friction?
That is a question that cuts completely through the noise and the corporate jargon. It immediately highlights the massive, uncomfortable gap between what you are currently doing and what a true 10X effort actually looks like in practice.
So what does this all mean when we pull back and look at the entire landscape? Let's tie all these concepts together. The core soul of this chapter is the realization that the 10X rule is not merely some cute, optimized mathematical formula for productivity.
Not at all.
It is not a life hack. It is an essential, non-negotiable suit of armor against the brutal reality of the world.
Reality is harsh, and it owes you absolutely nothing. The world is full of unpredictable chaos, sudden economic shocks, and deeply apathetic markets that simply do not care about your dreams or your potential.
They really don't.
And worse, we are constantly battling our own insidious internal excuse calculators that are endlessly whispering that we should just lower the bar, give up, and be comfortable.
The ultimate memorable insight here is that success is not an event that passively happens to you. It is not a gift bestowed by luck. Success is a hostile territory that you must actively conquer and then ruthlessly hold through relentless, mathematically overwhelming effort.
Yes.
When you strip away every excuse, you realize a profound truth. You do not fail because your dream was too big. You fail because your effort was too small.
When you truly, deeply internalize that concept, it completely eradicates the victim mentality from your operating system. You realize that you are in absolute control. The macroeconomy might fluctuate, competitors might cheat, and technology might shift, but the sheer volume of action you choose to take is the one variable you have absolute dictatorial authority over.
Now that you understand exactly the mechanics of why massive 10X effort is the ultimate survival tool in a hostile market, it forces us to confront a much deeper, almost existential question.
Okay, what is it?
If it requires this staggering, exhausting amount of effort just to survive and win, what exactly are you fighting so hard for? If you were going to burn that much fuel to achieve escape velocity, your why better be absolutely bulletproof.
That is the necessary next step. Because if your fundamental definition of success is flawed, or if you are chasing a target that doesn't actually matter to you, applying a 10X multiplier just means you are running in the wrong direction 10 times faster.
Exactly. Before we wrap up, I want to leave you with a completely different angle to ponder. Something that builds on everything we've discussed today.
I love these.
We've established that the 10X rule is the only way to break through market apathy and outwork the competition. But consider this. As these concepts become more widely adopted, what happens to the market ecosystem when every major player in your industry adopts the 10X rule?
Oh, that's an interesting thought.
Right. If everyone is taking 10X action, does the baseline of reality simply shift upward? Do we eventually enter an arms race of effort where the new minimum standard becomes 100X? Think about the implications of a world where massive action is no longer an advantage, but simply the price of admission. It's something to chew on as you map out your strategy for tomorrow.
An arms race of effort. That is a fascinating concept to leave off on.
In our next deep dive, we are going to challenge everything you think you know about your obligations in life as we explore the true, uncompromising definition of success. Keep diving deep, keep multiplying your actions, and we'll catch you next time.
What if everything you've been told about success, the idea that it's just a journey, that it's not everything, or that you should just, well, be happy with what you have? What if all of that is actually a massive, comfortable lie designed to keep you average?
Oh, that is a heavy question right out of the gate.
I mean, I really want you, the listener, to just sit with that for a second. We hear these platitudes all the time.
All the time, yeah.
They sound nice, they take the pressure off, but what if treating success as an option, or like a nice-to-have luxury, is the exact reason most people just never reach their full potential?
It completely flips the conventional wisdom we've all been, kind of spoon-fed since childhood.
Right.
We're social conditioned to view success as this bonus, like the cherry on top of life, rather than the actual foundation of it. And I mean, when you treat something as a bonus, you inherently treat it as expendable when things get difficult.
Totally. So today we are taking a deep dive into the core concepts from Grant Cardone's The 10X Rule. Specifically, we're looking at the chapters, What is Success? And Success is Your Duty.
Yeah, these are pivotal chapters.
For anyone out there interested in business, entrepreneurship, or frankly, just, upgrading your life in a serious way, this matters. Shifting your mindset from merely wanting success to feeling like you literally owe success. It's the ultimate shortcut to eliminating excuses.
Absolutely. And the mission of our deep dive today is to really deconstruct that true definition of success.
Break it all down.
Right. To strip away those comforting myths that society feeds us on a daily basis. We want to rebuild a mindset where achievement isn't just a preference, but a mandatory ethical imperative for your survival.
I think the most logical place to start is with the definition itself. Because, if we're going to treat success as a duty, we better know what we're actually aiming at.
Exactly. You can't hit a target you haven't defined.
Right. And the problem I see is that so many people get permanently stuck chasing a totally outdated version of success. I mean, they are operating on a definition that expired like 5 years ago.
And that happens because they completely misunderstand the fundamental nature of what success actually is.
Okay, let's unpack this. What is the baseline definition we're working with here?
So the baseline definition is that success is the degree or measure of attaining some desired object or end.
Okay, so getting what you want.
Basically, yeah. At its core, it means something turning out well. But the most crucial element, and this is the one almost everyone misses, is that success is a moving target.
A moving target.
Yes.
Yeah.
It is not a static finish line where you just cross it and you're done.
Right. So the definition of what it means to be successful completely changes depending on where you are in life.
Exactly. Let's trace that progression because it really shows how radical the shift is. Think about early childhood. Success is getting an allowance for the first time.
Oh, yeah. $5 a week was huge.
Right. Or maybe convincing your parents to let you stay up past your bedtime. That is a massive victory to an 8-year-old. It requires strategy, negotiation, execution.
That's a full-time job.
It really is. But then, in your teens, staying up late isn't the goal anymore. The target moves.
Because you can stay up as late as you want, usually.
Exactly. So success shifts to, getting a driver's license, or getting a later curfew, or having your own room.
And it doesn't stop there at all. In your early 20s, success might look like, furnishing your first apartment without using milk crates as chairs.
Yeah, buying real furniture.
Or landing that first promotion at work. It's about establishing independence.
Yeah.
But later on, the target moves again. It becomes about marriage, having kids, securing bigger promotions.
Building a financial safety net.
Right. And as you age further, the definition transforms once more. In your later years, success is typically defined by good health, your legacy, and, how you'll be remembered by the world.
And the conditions you face, the people you surround yourself with, the situations you find yourself in, they constantly force that definition to adapt.
So where does the friction come from?
The friction comes when a person achieves a goal but fails to set the next one. They hit a target they set in their 20s, and then suddenly they're 35, and they feel completely hollow. They're sitting there wondering why they aren't happy anymore.
It makes me think of smartphone operating systems. It's like iOS updates.
Oh, that's a great way to put it.
Yeah, because you don't just update your phone once in 2018 and say, cool, I'm good forever. My phone is successful.
It would stop working.
Exactly. If you stop updating, eventually the apps crash, the security protocols fail, and the phone basically bricks itself. Success is like a mandatory software update for your life. If you aren't installing the new version, you're becoming obsolete.
That is a highly accurate way to look at the underlying mechanism because, the human brain is actually wired for this continuous update cycle.
Yeah, neurologically.
Yes, neurologically speaking. Our dopamine systems are designed to reward the hunt, not the feast.
Wow. Reward the hunt, not the feast. That makes so much sense.
The moment you achieve something, the satisfaction immediately begins to decay. Cardone captures this fleeting nature of achievement with a really visceral analogy. He says success is like a breath of air.
Like a breath of air. Okay, so your last breath was incredibly important. I mean, it kept you alive.
Right.
But it is nowhere near as important as your next one.
Exactly. If you try to live the rest of your life off the last breath of air you took, you will suffocate.
You literally die.
You do. Yet psychologically, this is exactly what millions of people do with their careers. They hit a milestone, they get the degree, they buy the house, they hit some revenue target, and they take a massive deep breath.
And then they hold it.
They hold it. They try to coast. They try to survive on yesterday's oxygen.
And the same logic applies to relationships too, doesn't it? I mean, you cannot maintain a marriage purely off the love you felt on your wedding day.
Oh, absolutely not.
The wedding day was a massive success, sure. But if you don't keep breathing life into that relationship, it suffocates.
It becomes stagnant.
And there's another analogy in the material that pairs perfectly with this. The lawn analogy.
Panning the grass thing, yeah.
Yeah, you can go out and mow your grass on a Saturday. You do a great job. The edges are crisp. It looks fantastic. You were successful. But the grass is going to grow back.
Always. You can't claim permanent victory over the yard. Nature just doesn't allow it.
Right.
Success requires continuous maintenance. It's not about attaining one goal one time. It's about what you can persist in creating over and over again. It is continuous action. It's not just a stagnant trophy on a shelf.
I have to push back here, though. Let's look at this from the listener's perspective.
Sure.
If success keeps changing, and if it demands constant, never-ending maintenance like breathing or, mowing a lawn that never stops growing, isn't that just an exhausting, endless treadmill?
I hear that a lot.
Right, because at some point, when do we get to rest? I mean, isn't the whole point of working hard so that eventually you don't have to work hard anymore?
Well, that is the standard societal narrative. Work hard now so you can stop later. Relax on a beach.
Yeah, the whole retirement dream.
But let's look at the psychology of highly successful people. They don't see this cycle as a treadmill of exhaustion. They are genuinely obsessed with the next breath of accomplishment.
Obsessed?
Yes. When someone asks a billionaire or a top-tier athlete, you've made enough money to live comfortably, you have all the championship rings, why are you still pushing? The answer always revolves around potential.
Interesting. So it's not about the money at that point.
Not at all. They are compulsive about reaching their full potential. They understand that resting on their laurels leads to decay.
So feeling restless or dissatisfied with your current level of achievement, that isn't a symptom of failure or greed. Because, let's be real, society often labels it as greed. Like, why can't you just be happy with what you have?
Society labels it as greed because society is uncomfortable with relentless ambition. It makes average people feel bad.
That's a great point.
Disappointment or dissatisfaction with where you are right now does not mean something is wrong with you. It usually means something is right with you. It means you're acutely aware of your untapped potential. Extremely successful people know their efforts have to continue for new achievements to be realized. The cycle of success only ends when the hunt is abandoned.
So the distinction seems to be about purpose versus burden. Like, if you view the hunt as a burden, as just something you're forced to do to pay the bills, it will absolutely exhaust you.
It will drain you completely.
But if you view the hunt as your fundamental purpose, it invigorates you.
Exactly. And consider the alternative. What happens when people actually do stop and rest? We see it all the time with early retirees.
Or athletes who leave their sport without a next chapter plan.
Yes. They often experience severe depression, health declines, destructive behaviors. The human machine is built to solve problems and overcome obstacles.
And when you remove the obstacles,
The machine turns on itself.
wow. So for you listening right now, you really need to audit your current definition of success. Ask yourself honestly, are you trying to survive on a breath of air from 5 years ago?
Are you leaning on a college degree you earned a decade ago?
Or a sales record you broke in 2021? while your current output has basically flatlined. It is time to update your definition to match your current potential and your current life stage.
Because if you don't update that definition, and if you don't accept that success requires constant new breaths, you're putting yourself in a very precarious position.
It's risky.
Extremely. Staying stagnant isn't just boring or unfulfilling. The argument here is that staying stagnant is incredibly dangerous. And this leads us to a brutal reality. Success isn't just about accumulating luxury. It is about sheer survival.
Survival. I mean, that is a heavy word, and it completely shifts the paradigm. We usually associate success with sports cars, big houses, flying first class.
The fun stuff.
Right. We don't associate it with basic survival. If I don't get that promotion, I'm not going to physically die. I'll just be, well, slightly less comfortable. So how do we bridge the gap between luxury and life or death survival?
By looking at the fundamental law of expansion. In any ecosystem, whether it's biological or economic, without continued growth, an entity will eventually cease to exist.
Grow or die.
Basically.
Yeah.
You are either expanding or you're contracting. There is no such thing as maintaining the status quo indefinitely because the world around you is constantly changing.
Inflation eats your savings.
Exactly. New competitors enter your market. Technologies render your skills obsolete.
Entropy. Everything naturally degrades into chaos unless you actively apply energy to maintain and grow it.
Precisely. Success is vital to the well-being of the individual, yes, but also the family unit and the broader group. It provides confidence, security, and the ability to contribute to society.
Right.
Without success, individuals and groups cannot thrive. They eventually get consumed by those who are expanding.
And history is littered with examples of this on a massive scale. We're talking about the collapse of entire empires. The Vikings, ancient Rome, ancient Greece.
Huge empires.
These were massive, seemingly invincible entities. But they all faced disaster the moment their expansion stopped.
Let's look at the mechanism of that collapse, just to make it concrete. Take the Roman Empire. When Rome was expanding, it was constantly acquiring new resources, new wealth, new technologies.
Integrating new cultures, yeah.
Right. This influx of success funded their massive infrastructure and military. But when they reached the limits of their expansion and shifted to a purely defensive maintenance mindset, the rot set in.
They couldn't maintain the lawn.
Exactly. They couldn't generate enough new wealth to support their existing infrastructure. They contracted, they weakened, and they were consumed by expanding forces from the outside.
And the exact same principle applies to modern companies. I mean, think about Blockbuster Video or Sears.
Oh, classic examples.
These were absolute titans of industry. They completely dominated their spaces. But they hit a point where they stopped expanding. Blockbuster looked at Screaming and basically said, no, we are comfortable with our late fees in our brick-and-mortar stores.
We're gonna hold our breath.
Yes. They tried to survive on the oxygen of the 1990s. And Netflix, which was obsessively focused on the next breath, on expansion, completely consumed them.
If a business stops acquiring new customers, stops innovating, stops expanding its footprint, it is only a matter of time before it goes bankrupt.
So the micro level is really no different than the macro level. If your personal skill set is not expanding, if your professional network isn't growing, if your financial literacy is stagnant, you are being outpaced by the environment around you.
Which brings up a very insidious part of modern culture.
Okay, what's that?
If expansion is literally life or death for a business or a family, then why is society so obsessed with telling us to just chill out? We are bombarded with these cute sayings. Success is a journey, not a destination. Success isn't everything. I just want to be happy.
Right.
Where do these phrases even come from if they are so demonstrably dangerous?
Yeah, why do we say them?
They come from cognitive dissonance and the need for psychological self-preservation. When people realize how incredibly difficult continuous expansion is, they have a choice.
They can either step up or back down.
Right. They can either face the pain of extreme effort or they can devalue the goal to make themselves feel better about not achieving it.
It's a coping mechanism.
It is entirely a coping mechanism.
Oh.
People who minimize the importance of success have usually given up on their own chances of accomplishment.
Wow.
They've stopped trying, and now they're spending their lives trying to convince others to do the same, to validate their own choice.
Misery loves company.
Exactly. When someone says to you, success isn't everything, they are actively trying to diminish the value of something they haven't been able to attain themselves. It's a way of making their own lack of expansion feel like a noble philosophical choice rather than a failure of effort.
It's toxic comfort. And those sayings drive me crazy when you look at the harsh realities of the real world. I mean, think about when a brutal economic downturn hits.
It shatters all those sayings.
It really does. When a recession sweeps through and you lose your job or your business revenue drops by 50%, you realize very quickly that you cannot eat cute little sayings.
No, you cannot.
You cannot walk into the bank and pay your mortgage with the phrase, well, success is a journey. When the medical bills pile up, I just want to be happy, doesn't fund the treatment.
The stark reality is that you have to learn to win at the game of life, not just passively play it. We tell kids, it doesn't matter if you win or lose, it's how you play the game.
Which is fine for, like, under-8 soccer.
Sure, while that might be fine for a Saturday morning soccer match, it is disastrous advice for adulthood.
Because your kids do not benefit from seeing you quit.
No.
Nobody in the world benefits from your unpublished book. Nobody benefits from the business you were too afraid to launch. You have to win because your victory ensures the survival of your ideas and your family.
And let's zoom out and look at the whole economic ecosystem. If you quit caring, you quit winning. If you quit winning, you can't provide.
Right.
A person who isn't successful can't buy goods and services. That slows the local economy. They don't generate tax revenue, which diminishes funding for schools and hospitals. They become a drain on resources rather than a contributor.
Everything is connected.
So your personal success, your expansion, is literally fueling the survival of the community around you.
So the practical takeaway for you, the listener, is that you have to aggressively banish those limiting sayings from your vocabulary. You have to treat winning and expansion as absolutely mandatory.
It's non-negotiable.
Right. And recognizing that success is about survival completely changes the stakes of the game. If your family's actual survival, their security, their future depends on your success, then achieving it is no longer just a personal, selfish choice.
This is the most radical leap in the material, in my opinion. It shifts success from a sociological concept to a moral one. Success becomes your duty.
Duty. I think this is the concept that really separates this mindset from standard self-help advice. We're moving from casually waiting for success, or hoping for it, to viewing it as a duty, an obligation, and a responsibility.
Treating it as an ethical issue.
Treating it as an ethical issue, that's huge.
Treating success as an option is the primary reason most people don't reach their full capability. When success is just an option, it is incredibly easy to make excuses when things get hard.
Oh, the market is down, I'll just try again next year.
Yeah.
Oh, I'm a little tired today, I'll make those sales calls tomorrow. But when it's a duty, when failure is fundamentally unacceptable, your behavior changes entirely. Okay, hold on. I need to jump in here and push back on this ethical label, because I know this is going to cause friction for a lot of people listening.
Let's hear it.
If I just want to work my standard 9 to 5, make a decent average living, and spend my weekends coaching my kids' Little League team,
Yeah.
who am I hurting? Calling that an ethics violation feels incredibly harsh.
It does sound harsh at first.
That feels like toxic hustle culture on steroids.
Yeah.
Right? How do we separate an ethical duty to succeed from just mindlessly grinding yourself to dust?
That is the critical friction point. But let's look at how ethics is being defined in this context. Ethics isn't just about not stealing or not lying. It involves living up to the potential you have been given.
Okay.
If you have the capacity, the intelligence, and the opportunity to create massive value in the world, and you consciously choose not to because you prefer comfort,
Yeah.
you are withholding your gifts.
So it's not about comparing my bank account to Elon Musk's bank account.
Not at all.
It's about comparing my current output to my own maximum potential.
Yes. If you know you could be leading that department or building that company or writing that book that could help thousands of people, but you settle for average because it's easier, you are shortchanging your family, your community, and yourself.
You're robbing them of what you could have contributed.
Exactly. Any disparity between what you know you can do and what you are actually achieving is the ethical violation. It's the sin of omitted greatness.
That reframes it completely. And to make this tangible, there is a brilliant analogy used in the text to describe the mindset required to fulfill this duty. The good parent analogy.
I love this one.
Right. Think about the instinctual drive of a good parent. They will do whatever it takes to protect and provide for their children. They will wake up at 3 a.m. to feed a crying baby despite being totally exhausted.
They don't even think about it.
They'll work multiple jobs to put food on the table. If a threat presents itself, they will literally put their own lives at risk to protect their kids without a second thought. There is no hesitation. It's a biological and ethical duty.
And the author argues that you must envision your success with that exact same do-or-die ferocity. You cannot treat your goals like a casual weekend hobby. You have to approach them with a hungry dog on the back of a meat truck mentality.
That image is so wild. The hungry dog on the meat truck.
It's visceral.
Yeah, because that dog isn't thinking about work-life balance. That dog isn't wondering if he's feeling motivated today. He sees survival, and he acts with absolute, relentless commitment.
To really drive this home, it helps to look at the author's own rock-bottom moment. At the age of 25, he was in a pitiful state. He was broke, he was using drugs and alcohol daily, and he was terminally hopeless.
Just totally lost.
He describes it as basically dying at age 20 because he lacked any direction or purpose. He was just drifting, fulfilling other people's purposes.
And honestly, a lot of people find themselves there, even if they aren't struggling with substance abuse. They are just numb, drifting through the corporate machine, doing exactly enough not to get fired.
Right. And the turning point for him wasn't a magic trick. It wasn't some sudden influx of passion where he woke up and loved his life.
What was it?
It was a commitment to duty. He committed to his career in sales, a job he didn't even particularly like at first, by the way.
Really?
Yeah, he didn't like it. But he committed to it not as a stopgap, but as a duty. He decided to do whatever he had to do to become successful at it. And treating it as a duty literally saved his life. It provided the structure, the purpose, and the momentum he needed to pull himself out of the abyss.
But, how does a comfortable, modern knowledge worker manufacture that level of desperation?
That's the million-dollar question.
Right. If I'm making $75,000 a year, sitting in a climate-controlled office, I'm not a hungry dog. I'm a very well-fed dog on a comfortable couch. How do you engineer that urgency without actually having to hit rock bottom?
You engineer it through extreme forward projection.
Forward projection, what does that mean?
You have to look at the trajectory of average. You look at inflation, you look at the rising cost of healthcare, you look at the volatility of the job market. You realize that your $75,000 a year is eroding in value every single day.
It's buying less and less.
Exactly. You manufacture urgency by realizing that comfort is an illusion. You sit down and calculate exactly what it will cost to secure your family's future in an unstable world, and suddenly, average looks terrifyingly risky.
And this exposes a massive blind spot in our society. I mean, you can spend 17 years in formal education. You take math, history, biology, literature.
And you learn nothing about this.
Nothing. You can go through that entire system without ever taking a single course on success. No one teaches you that success is a duty. We are taught how to perform tasks, but not how to build a philosophy of achievement.
Because the industrial education system was largely designed to produce reliable workers, not relentless achievers.
It teaches compliance.
Yes. Because of this, people are left aimless, and they end up spending their lifetimes merely fulfilling other people's purposes instead of building their own.
If you don't define your purpose and treat it as a duty, someone else will happily hire you to fulfill theirs. That is a chilling reality.
Very chilling.
So listener, here is your challenge. You need to sit down with yourself, sit down with your spouse or your business partners, and get everyone on the exact same page. You need to declare your success as vital to your collective future survival. Make it a non-negotiable duty.
But be prepared, because once you accept success as a duty, you cross a threshold of accountability.
Oh yeah, no more hiding.
You can no longer accept excuses, and the human ego hates accountability. When we fail in our duty, when we don't hit the target, we rarely want to admit that we simply didn't try hard enough or that our strategy was flawed.
Our egos are incredibly fragile.
Extremely. So instead of facing the pain of accountability, we invent comforting lies. We lie to ourselves. And the biggest, most pervasive, most destructive lie of all is the myth of luck.
Oh man, we have to unpack the lying. Because we all do it. When people don't get what they want, they immediately start providing justifications. They actively minimize the value of the goal they just failed to achieve.
Psychologists call this cognitive dissonance. When your beliefs or desires clash with your reality, it creates psychological pain.
It hurts to fail.
Right. So to resolve the pain, you alter your belief.
There's a perfect analogy for this in the book. The crying child in the grocery store. We've all seen this play out, right? A child sees a toy in the aisle, and they want it desperately. They ask for it, the parent says no.
And then the meltdown happens.
Yes. The child escalates, they cry, they throw a tantrum on the floor, they fight for it with every ounce of energy they have. But eventually they realize the parent is not going to cave. They absolutely cannot have the toy. What happens next?
The child stops crying, crosses their arms, pouts, and suddenly declares, I didn't even want that stupid toy anyway.
Exactly. They convince themselves the toy is worthless so they don't have to feel the pain of not getting it. And what is terrifying is that adults do the exact same thing with their careers, their businesses, and their dreams.
Every single day.
We try for a massive promotion, we put in the hours, but we don't get it. Instead of saying, I need to improve my leadership skills, we say, well, I didn't want the extra responsibility anyway. It would have ruined my weekends.
Or an entrepreneur launches a product, it fails to gain traction, and instead of admitting their marketing was weak, they say, the market just wasn't ready for my genius.
Right. People just don't get it.
It is a lie we tell ourselves to protect our ego from the sting of failure.
And it gets worse. When we look at people who actually do achieve those massive goals, the people who got the promotion or built a unicorn startup, we invent another lie to explain their success so we don't feel inferior.
We call them lucky.
We attribute their achievements to luck. We call them an overnight success.
And by labeling someone as lucky, you completely dismiss the massive, unreasonable action that preceded their victory. It is a way of letting yourself off the hook.
Because if it's just luck, it's not my fault I didn't get it.
Right. If their success was just luck, then your lack of success isn't your fault. It's just the roll of the dice.
Let's destroy the overnight success myth right now, because the examples of this are staggering. Take Colonel Sanders. We all know Kentucky Fried Chicken. The guy's an icon.
A global icon.
But what most people don't know is the sheer volume of rejection he faced. He pitched his chicken recipe over 80 times before anyone bought it. 80 rejections.
Imagine that.
Imagine driving around the country, sleeping in your car, getting told no 80 times in a row.
That isn't luck. That is relentless, almost psychotic persistence in the face of failure.
Or look at Sylvester Stallone. He wrote the script for Rocky in just 3 days. When you hear that, it sounds like a lightning bolt of pure luck and inspiration, an overnight miracle.
But the context tells a different story.
The context is that he was so utterly destitute he couldn't afford to heat his apartment. He was so broke he had to sell his own dog for $50 just to buy food to survive.
He sold his dog. That's desperation.
He was freezing, starving, and completely committed to his goal when he wrote that script.
And Walt Disney. He was laughed out of financing meetings for his idea of building a massive amusement park. People thought it was a ridiculous, unprofitable fantasy.
And today?
Today, families save for years to spend thousands of dollars to visit that exact park. When we call these people lucky, we erase their struggle. We erase their massive action.
Okay, I hear you, and those stories are undeniable. But let me play devil's advocate for the listener who is thinking, come on, surely some people just get lucky.
Well, sure.
Like being born into the right family or just happen to be in the right place at the right time has to account for something, doesn't it?
It's a fair question. Variables outside our control certainly exist. But let's look at the underlying math of luck. The philosophy here states that luck is just a byproduct of taking the most action.
How so?
Lucky people don't magically become successful people. Instead, people who completely commit themselves to massive action seem to get lucky.
Because they are creating more surface area for luck to strike.
Precisely. Think of action as a net. If you cast a tiny net once a week, you might catch a fish, and people will say you got lucky.
But if you cast a huge net...
Right. If you are casting a massive net 1,000 times a day, you are going to haul in a ton of fish. You didn't get luckier than the first guy. You just increased the probability of a positive outcome through sheer volume of effort. The author references the old saying, the harder I work, the luckier I get.
You don't see the hundreds of failures. You don't see the 80 rejections Colonel Sanders faced. You only see the one time it hits, the one yes, and you call it luck.
And there is a behavioral magnetism to this, too. Successful people develop this aura, this charm, simply because they approach success as a right and a duty. They carry themselves differently.
That makes perfect sense. Think about a scenario where an incredible opportunity, a massive client, a revolutionary idea floats into a room. It sits between two people. Person A thinks success is their absolute ethical duty. They are desperate for it. They're hunting for it to feed their family. Person B has a casual take it or leave it, success is just a journey attitude. Who's going to grab that opportunity?
The duty-driven person will grab it and execute on it every single time. They are primed to recognize the opportunity because they are actively looking for it.
They're on the hunt.
Exactly. The casual person might not even notice the opportunity was there until the other person has already capitalized on it. Then the casual person will look at person A and say, wow, they were so lucky to be in the room when that happened.
You're both in the room. One just had the duty-driven lens to see it.
So to the listener, the advice here requires some deep vulnerability. It is entirely okay to admit that you wanted something and it didn't come to fruition.
It's part of the process.
You wanted the business to succeed and it failed. Acknowledge the loss, feel the sting, but stop lying to yourself to protect your ego, because that lie prevents you from analyzing what went wrong and taking the next necessary action. Banish the word luck from your vocabulary entirely. When you see someone succeed, instead of attributing it to luck, ask yourself, what massive action did they take that I am not seeing?
Stop looking for an overnight miracle and simply increase your volume of action.
Exactly. If we pull all of these threads together, everything we've unpacked from these concepts ties into one very clear, paradigm-shifting insight.
And what's that?
That insight is that success is not an external accident. It is not an arbitrary gift bestowed by the universe. It is not a limited commodity that someone else can hoard, leaving less for you.
And it is certainly not a casual, meandering journey.
No, success is an ever-evolving, living entity. And just like any living thing, it requires constant new breaths of massive action to survive, to grow, and to expand.
By stripping away all those comforting lies we've been taught, the myth of the overnight success, the danger of those cute limiting sayings, you realize the ultimate truth. Success is entirely in your hands.
100%.
It is not up to the Federal Reserve. It is not up to your boss. It is not up to the algorithm. It is up to you. It is your ethical duty, your obligation, and your absolute responsibility to yourself, your family, and your untapped potential. When you make the mental shift to treat success as a must-have survival imperative rather than a nice-to-have luxury, your entire reality shifts.
It is a demanding, rigorous philosophy. It doesn't allow for laziness. But it is also incredibly empowering, because if success is your duty and luck is just a byproduct of action, then you are no longer a victim of circumstance.
You are the architect of your outcomes.
Absolutely. You flip from playing defense to playing offense.
So we've covered the dynamic definition of the moving target, the reality of expansion versus survival, the ethical duty of the hungry dog, and the psychological lies we tell ourselves about luck. But I want to leave you, the listener, with a final provocative thought to mull over as you go about your day.
It's an important question to ask once you cross this threshold.
If success is truly your absolute ethical duty, if you are genuinely fighting for your family's survival and expansion, what does that mean for how you view your competition? If the stakes are literally life and death for your goals, is it really enough to just compete fairly in the marketplace? Or do you have a moral obligation to completely dominate your space?
That is a dangerous and thrilling question that completely disrupts how business is traditionally taught. And if you are out there worrying that taking all this massive success for yourself somehow leaves less for everyone else, you need to think again. Next time, we will shatter the grand illusion of competition and reveal why there is absolutely no shortage of success in the world.
Until then, take a deep breath and get to work.
What you just listened was the beginning of a full audio, way longer, explaining every single chapter of the book. If you would like to keep listening to the end and access to the full audio, you can access it with the link down below in the description and in the pinned comment.